Hey truckers, here is part 11 of I Have a City in an Alternate World. Let's dive into the video. With the activation of the secret skill of rebirth, the entire basement was immediately shrouded in a mysterious atmosphere. It was as if the entire world had been expelled from the world, and the pressure was terrifying. Lin Huishuan watched from the side. He was affected by the atmosphere, and even his breathing became careful, afraid that it would affect Tangjin and ruin the entire resurrection process. About 5 minutes later, the strange light disappeared, and the basement returned to normal. Lin Huishuan felt the pressure on his body relax, and he almost collapsed to the ground. Tangjin inhaled a deep breath of air. He turned his head and looked at the blood pool by the side. The soft sound of water could be heard, followed by 2 delicate cries. 2 perfect and flawless young girls stood up from the blood pool. Dark red liquid slid down from their exaggerated soft curves, extremely eye-catching against the white background. The body that was cultivated by the mother tree had abandoned almost all the defects of the human body. It was born with a sense of compelling spiritual energy, which was how the name Nature Child came about. It was perfect and alluring, making people unable to look away after seeing it. New N0VEL chapters are published on N0V/E/LB/IN/CO/M. The 2 girls first looked around blankly, then they saw Tangjin and Lin Huishuan. "Ah, Yingluo!" A shriek was heard, and the 2 girls immediately crossed their arms and squatted in the blood pool. They shouted at the 2 of them, "Brother and uncle, you're perverts. Hurry up and get out." When Lin Huishuan heard his sister's familiar voice and tone, he immediately felt excited. He chuckled foolishly and was about to turn and leave. Tangjin casually threw over 2 pieces of clothes from the side and said to the 2 girls, "Hurry up and put on your clothes. It's not like you didn't see it just now." After the 2 girls took the clothes, they hurriedly put them on. Only then did they walk out of the blood pool barefooted. They came in front of Tangjin and the other man and pushed them with angry expressions. "D*MN uncle, you pervert. If you dare to peek again, I'm going to." Hey! Huiyan, you've become so pretty." Jean Mingjin snorted and was about to say something harsh when she suddenly realized that Lin Huiyan's expressions seemed to have changed. Not only had her figure and skin become better, but even her temperament had become different. If it wasn't for the fact that her voice and tone were extremely familiar, she wouldn't have recognized this close friend of hers. Lin Huiyan was also looking at Jean Mingjin in shock, her face full of disbelief. This was another amazing thing about the mother tree's body. It could change its face according to the original appearance of the host soul. Although it was not exactly the same, the basic outline was not wrong and not the same face. Tangjin saw the 2 girls looking at each other, so he let Lin Huishuan explain the whole thing to them, while he went upstairs to read. After around 10 minutes or so, the 3 of them walked out from the basement. However, the gazes that the 2 ladies used to look at Tangjin were a little strange. Their faces were filled with respect, worship, and deep curiosity. Tangjin kept the book in his hand after seeing the 3 of them sit in front of him. He smiled and said, "I believe that the 2 of you already understand the cause and effect of the entire matter, so I will not repeat it. However, what I'm about to say will affect your future, so you must listen carefully." The 2 girls and Lin Huishuan nodded at the same time, their expressions very serious. Since they already knew about Tangjin's ability and mysterious origin, the 3 of them were naturally clear about their current situation. The road ahead was filled with difficulties and obstacles, but there was also infinite hope. As for what the future held, it all depended on their own grasp. Tangjin nodded his head in satisfaction when he saw the serious expressions of the 3 of them. He continued, "I'll provide you with a batch of gold as funds for your activities. You can decide how you want to use it. Through this company, you can secretly recruit a group of loyal subordinates for self-protection and to carry out activities. I'll provide you with a game program and a design of the supporting facilities. This is the entire set of virtual game technology. You need to develop it and promote it vigorously. It's best to promote it to the whole world. Don't ask for the specific reason, just do as I say. I believe that once this game is launched, it will bring you unimaginable wealth. In addition, you need to pay attention to the Pickle Nation and the American Alliance. Keep a low profile and try not to attract their attention. After Tang Jin finished speaking, he chatted with the three of them about some other things to take note of, then let Lin Huixuan lead the way to his personal residence. Due to his family's wealth, Lin Huixuan had a 3-story villa of his own. Tang Jin's purpose for going there was to transport gold for the three of them. After teleporting back to the Holy Dragon City, Tang Jin took 2 tons of gold from the cave and returned to Lin Huixuan's house. Currently, gold was everywhere in the Holy Dragon City. Tang Jin had been worried all day that he had no place to store it. Sending it to the original world to exchange for money was a good solution. After the 2 tons of gold were placed in the basement of Lin Huixuan's house, they looked exceptionally dazzling under the light. He also released all the parts of the rebirth altar for Lin Huixuan's safekeeping. No longer paying attention to the 3 people who were blinded by the gold, Tang Jin drove the pickup truck back to his rental house. After locking the door, he teleported back to the Holy Dragon City. After patrolling around the Sacred Dragon Valley, Tang Jin returned to his study room. He turned on a modified laptop and started to connect it to the Universal Electronic Kit to write the so-called virtual game program. For a super black technology like the Universal Electronic Kit, writing a virtual game program was actually an extremely easy thing to do. However, Tang Jin's goal wasn't that simple. Creating a revolutionary virtual game in his original world was just a cover-up. He planned to use this game device that could connect to the human mind to help him with his soul transmission experiment. He would collect all kinds of data he needed and hand it to the Universal Electronic Kit for analysis. At that time, Tang Jin would use the virtual game to create a world similar to the Endless Wilderness. Through the influence of the game, he would let the humans who participated in the game gradually become familiar with and accept the world of Luqing. While they were playing the game, the runic magic circle engraved in the game helmet and game chamber would take effect, transmitting a trace of the user's spiritual power. The soul power was like countless rays that were sent into the void. Without affecting the health of the players, it would communicate with the plane where the world of towers was located. The dimension where the world of Luqing was located was uncertain and unknown. Tang Jin could only use this method of casting a wide net. After the soul signal from the original world was sent out, Tang Jin would build a giant runic magic circle similar to a receiver in the Holy Dragon City. Once a soul signal from the original world was sent over, it would be received by the giant runic magic circle and then sent into the soul host body placed on the runic magic circle. When a soul from the original world entered a host body, it would automatically wake up, which meant that the cross-plane soul transfer experiment was a complete success. When the time came, as long as Tang Jin locked onto the coordinates of his original world, he could transfer a large number of talents from his original world. He could have as many as he wanted. This was a very important step in all of Tang Jin's plans. It was related to the life and death of the Holy Dragon City and Tang Jin's wild ambitions. Therefore, only success was allowed. Failure was not allowed. In the Sacred Dragon Valley, Big Bear was wearing the heavy alloy armor of the Glitter Gold race and was training the ogres with great interest. The giant armor that Tang Jin had specially forged had already been equipped on the ogres. Now, these extra-large monsters were all armed to the teeth. The giant spiked clubs were brandished in a vigorous manner, and the killing power was extremely terrifying. As the attack landed, the table-sized boulder was immediately reduced to dust. From a distance, the scene of a large row of ogres standing side by side was truly extraordinary. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it was a nightmare to encounter such a terrifying enemy on the battlefield. However, in front of Deshyeong, these terrifying war monsters were all as obedient as kittens. If he told them to go east, they would never go west, and they would carry out Deshyeong's orders extremely thoroughly. Tangjin felt an inexplicable sense of joy as he watched the group of ogres being controlled by the slightly short Big Bear. After seeing Tangjin come over, Deshyeong immediately ran over and pulled Tangjin to introduce his soldiers. His face was filled with pride. After letting Big Bear sit on the ground, Tangjin patted Big Bear's smooth head and gave him a large bag of candy. He even had an expression of approval on his face, making Big Bear extremely happy. Holding the candy in his hand, Big Bear walked to the ogres and ordered them to sit down. Then he peeled the candy and stuffed a large handful into the ogres' mouths. Get latest level CHPTers on NVE/LBJ/N.C/M. The ogres' mouths were too big, and the sweet taste of the candy made them drool. Unfortunately, without the Big Bear's order, they didn't dare to swallow it at all, and could only let their saliva drip from their wide-open mouths. After all the ogres had thrown a handful of candy into their bloody mouths, the Big Bear ordered them to shut up. The ogres who received the order immediately swallowed the candy. They had a look of enjoyment on their faces, and their eyes narrowed into slits. The ogres' appetites were too big, and this little bit of candy wasn't enough to fill the gaps between their teeth. After tasting the delicious food, the ogres looked at the half-filled bag of candy in Big Bear's hands with longing expressions. Big Bear roared and quickly stuffed the rest of the candy into the gaps of his heavy armor. Then, he waved a mace and let the ogres continue their training. Tangjin felt that it was quite funny as he watched from the side. However, he also felt gratified for Deshyeong. This child, who was born with an intellectual defect, had unintentionally discovered his own path to success and proved the value of his life. Since the ogres had been successfully tamed, Tangjin naturally wouldn't let go of this monster troop that had such powerful combat strength. As long as there was an opportunity, Tangjin would definitely capture some ogres and hand them over to Big Bear to control after taming. At the same time, Tangjin had also sent out a resident that he could trust to assist him. Many years later, when Big Bear controlled countless ogres and followed the Holy Dragon City's army to conquer cities, who would dare to look down on him? After watching Deshyeong train the ogres for a while, Tangjin came to the cage that used to hold the ogres. There were 2 four-legged flying dragons locked up here, and their limbs were firmly locked by iron chains as thick as a child's arm. Compared to the ogres that were afraid of Tangjin, these 2 four-legged flying dragons were a little unruly. They would occasionally howl to express the dissatisfaction in their hearts. Unfortunately, every time this happened, an electric baton would stab them, and the intense pain made them not dare to be too presumptuous. Tangjin stood outside the iron bars and looked at the four-legged flying dragon. He discovered that there was still violence and unwillingness in their eyes. There was also an undetectable fear in their eyes when they saw Tangjin appear. Tangjin gently shook his head. He knew that it was not a simple matter to tame this kind of intelligent four-legged flying dragon. One would need to have sufficient patience. Tangjin had a plan in his heart. He would control the entire four-legged flying dragon race by taming these 2 four-legged flying dragons. At that time, these kings in the sky would become the flying mounts of the Holy Dragon City's soldiers and become true dragon knights. Building an army of monsters, or rather, cultivating a group of monster mounts suitable for human use, was crucial for the future development of Holy Dragon City. Perhaps at some point in time, Tangjin would build a monster taming ground to tame all kinds of monsters from the wilderness. After the humans from the original world arrived, they could obtain these mounts through the harsh conditions set by Tangjin. Then, they could ride them and help Tangjin expand his territory. The taming of the ogres had been successful, and the next step was to tame the two proud and stubborn four-legged wyverns. Tangjin had plenty of time to deal with these two four-legged flying dragons. If these two fellows intended to fight to the death, Tangjin did not mind accompanying them to the end. If you don't listen to me, don't expect to come out again. After Tangjin shouted in the dragon language that the four-legged flying dragon could understand, he no longer paid any attention to the four-legged flying dragon whose eyes were wide open and had a shocked expression. He turned around and swaggered away. Despicable stinky bug, let go of our Ying. A male four-legged flying dragon roared madly at Tangjin's back. However, his balls were accidentally hit by an electric baton. The four-legged flying dragon wailed in pain and fell to the ground, staggering. The residents of the Holy Dragon City were still cleaning up the Golden Flash Tribe's sanctuary. The materials they transported were also sorted and stored in the cave, filling the cave with useful and useless things. The dwarf Hearthhammer had been very busy recently. He was very interested in the metal technology of the Glitter Gold race. With the help of the translator given to him by the Holy Dragon City, he kept rummaging through the materials all day long and then pulled a large pile of metal parts back to his forging workshop. This guy was the same as the Goblin Luda. They were both typical workaholics. Once they were engrossed in their work, they no longer paid attention to anything. This caused Tangjin to want to chat with it, but he didn't have the opportunity to do so. Just as he was about to go to the Mother Tree to check on the cultivation progress of Lisa and the others, a Holy Dragon City soldier rushed over with a walkie-talkie and reported to Tangjin, "City Lord, there's news from the city wall that Black Rock City has sent another messenger to request an audience with you to discuss the strategy to encircle and annihilate the corpse race." Tangjin smiled softly when he heard this. He nodded to the soldier and said, "Hee, Black Rock City has finally arrived. It's even earlier than I had expected. It looks like they really can't hold on any longer." After the soldier retreated, Tangjin walked up the city wall in a neither hurried nor slow manner. In front of the Holy Dragon City, Xiao Rui looked at the towering walls of the city, his face filled with uncontrollable shock. The last time he had come to Holy Dragon City, he had only seen a city wall that was a dozen meters tall. But now, Holy Dragon City had actually built a new city wall, and it was so tall and majestic. In such a short period of time, they had built a giant wall that could be called a natural stronghold. In Xiao Rui's eyes, this was simply a miracle. This Holy Dragon City master has always been mysterious. His Holy Dragon City is also full of mysteries. Some time ago, he actually forced back the corpse race army that surrounded the city. Just based on this point, we definitely cannot underestimate it. Right now, our Black Rock City is on the brink of death. We need to rely on a powerful force like Holy Dragon City to help us in our battle. Only then will we have a chance of resolving this crisis. A middle-aged man with a long sword on his back stood beside Xiao Rui. He had white hair and a white beard. His expression was calm as he looked at the Holy Dragon City walls that were dyed red by dragon blood. "Teacher, you're right. The Holy Dragon City Lord is definitely not an ordinary person. Back then, he was only a rank 4, but he killed 2 of our Black Rock City's top experts in succession. One of them was a rank 5 elder. It's enough to show his terrifying strength." There was a young man who was dressed similarly to Xiao Rui standing beside the middle-aged man. He still had a lingering fear in his heart when he spoke of Tangjin's past battle achievements. Xiao Rui agreed with his teacher and senior brother's conversation in his heart. Compared to the other senior and junior brothers who had rushed over with him, he had a deeper understanding of Tangjin. Xiao Rui always had a feeling in his heart that Tangjin had been coveting Black Rock City for a long time. It was as if he wanted to swallow Black Rock City up at any moment. Black Rock City had invited this person to send out their troops, which meant that they were inviting a wolf into their home. Tangjin stood on the city wall and expressionlessly glanced at the Black Rock City's emissaries below the city wall. Compared to the 2 or 3 small fries that came the last time, the lineup of the Black Rock City's emissaries this time around was clearly much stronger. There were a total of 20 emissaries this time. The one with the highest cultivation was a white-haired middle-aged man. He was at the late stage of the 4th rank and could cross the threshold of the 5th rank at any time. The leather bags on the backs of the cultivators from Black Rock City attracted Tangjin's interest. It seemed that the things inside were the 20,000 level 2 brain beads that Black Rock City had brought over according to Tangjin's request. Although Tangjin had just made a fortune, there was no reason for him to push away this kind of wealth that had been delivered to his door. When upgrading to a level 3 city, a large number of brain pearls were required. Tangjin was hoping to get a sum from Black Rock City and the undead race to make up for the lack of sacrifices. Why has your Black Rock City come to my Holy Dragon City this time? Tangjin looked down at the envoy from Black Rock City and asked in an indifferent tone. When that middle-aged cultivator heard this, he looked at Tangjin and cupped his hands in greetings, Castellan Tang. I am the head instructor of the cultivators in Black Rock City. I have come under the orders of my Castellan to request the Holy Dragon City to send troops to attack the undead race. I have also presented 20,000 level 2 brains as a reward for sending troops. The city lord promised before he left that after the threat of the corpse race has been eliminated, Black Rock City will give you a generous gift. When this middle-aged man spoke, his tone and expression were neither humble nor arrogant. His aura was awe-inspiring, causing Tangjin to praise him slightly in his heart. Since your Black Rock City has brought the brains as I requested, I am not one to go back on my word. You can give a clear reply to the master of Blackfeather City. In 3 days at the latest, my Holy Dragon City will send troops to fight against the corpse race. As soon as Tangjin said this, the cultivators of Black Rock City below the city wall revealed a happy expression. The middle-aged cultivator even bowed deeply towards Tangjin before saying, "Thank you, City Lord Tang, for your understanding and helping our fellow humans. We'll give you our brains now, and we have a presumptuous request." Tangjin extended his hand and said to the middle-aged cultivator, "Please speak." The middle-aged cultivator looked ashamed. He took a deep breath and said, "Can I ask the city lord to allow us to enter the city and follow the Holy Dragon City's army to the battlefield?" After saying this, the middle-aged cultivator felt a little ashamed. Tangjin laughed out loud, "Why not? I'll let you in. However, your city lord is really cautious. He's afraid that I won't send out troops after I take the brain bead, so he simply let you follow and supervise. It's really awkward." After Tangjin said this, he did not say anything else. He only shook his head slightly and did not hide the disdain on his face. When the middle-aged cultivator heard this, he was even more ashamed and angry. He did not dare to raise his head to look at Tangjin. Opened the city gates and welcomed the envoy from Black Rock City. Following Tangjin's order, the huge city gate of the Holy Dragon City slowly opened. The cultivators of Black Rock City followed behind the middle-aged cultivator and passed through a long passage, entering the world behind the wall. With just a single glance, the cultivators of Black Rock City were completely stunned. It turned out that behind this giant city wall, there was actually a hidden paradise. In the distance, a huge ring-shaped mountain protected the Holy Dragon Valley, ensuring that it would not be attacked by the monsters on the ground in the endless wilderness. The clean and tidy Holy Dragon Valley was covered in inch-long green grass. Clusters of gorgeous flowers and plants had been ingeniously transplanted and planted, decorating the Holy Dragon Valley with magnificence. The newly built street lamps were cleverly placed in the grass. The residents of the Holy Dragon City used the original materials of the Flashing Gold tribe to transform them into beautiful street lamps and lawn lamps. A wide and solid rock road connected the city gate and led to a huge building in the middle of the valley. In front of the building, there seemed to be a huge square. Further away, there was a huge tree that covered a large area of land. Countless seven-colored fluorescent lights were constantly falling from the branches and leaves. One look and one could tell that it was not an ordinary thing. The Holy Dragon City's residents, who were neatly dressed, were walking back and forth in the Holy Dragon Valley with blissful smiles, working hard to make their homes even more beautiful. Compared to the cage-like Black Rock City, the Holy Dragon Valley was the true paradise. After sighing, the middle-aged cultivator turned his gaze to the Holy Dragon City soldiers lining up on both sides of the road to welcome him. The more he looked, the more shocked the middle-aged cultivator became. In the end, he could only sigh helplessly. No wonder the Holy Dragon City was able to repel the undead army's siege. It seemed like they did not only rely on the giant wall that was like a natural barrier, but also on these well-equipped and highly spirited Holy Dragon City soldiers. The middle-aged cultivator thought that he had seen many things, but he had never seen such well-equipped soldiers. They were all wearing the same armor, black leather boots, sharp steel machetes hanging from their waists, and strange semicircle helmets. All the Holy Dragon City's soldiers were dressed in the same way, standing on both sides of the road, looking straight ahead. They looked unusually mighty, and a valiant aura hit them head-on. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. Invading like fire, unmoving like a mountain. This was the feeling that the Holy Dragon City's soldiers gave the middle-aged cultivator. In comparison, the Black Rock City's soldiers were much more unorganized. The reason why the Holy Dragon City's soldiers had such a standard military posture was entirely because Tyson had forced the Holy Dragon City's soldiers to train after watching the video that Tangjin had brought. Now, it seemed that the effect was not bad. At least, they had stunned a group of cultivators in Black Rock City. However, what shocked the middle-aged cultivator the most was the flintlocks on the shoulders of these Holy Dragon City soldiers. The middle-aged cultivator had once seen a similar flintlock in a building when he was traveling many years ago. At that time, he was shocked by the lethality of this kind of flintlock and was extremely eager to have one. Unfortunately, this flintlock was regarded as a treasure by the elder of Lucheng. If it were not for a coincidence, the middle-aged cultivator would not have had the chance to witness the powerful power of this flintlock. Originally, he thought that he would never see that kind of flintlock again in his life. He did not expect that after a few decades, he would actually see a large pile of flintlocks in Holy Dragon City. The middle-aged cultivator did not dare to imagine how powerful the Holy Dragon City's combat power would be with this kind of flintlock. Afraid that his eyes were playing tricks on him, the middle-aged cultivator carefully examined the automatic rifles on the Holy Dragon City soldiers again and finally confirmed that he was not mistaken. The middle-aged cultivator was shocked and a sense of uneasiness slowly emerged in his heart. With so many flintlocks, Holy Dragon City would not find it too difficult to dominate this region, or even destroy Black Rock City. Low-level cultivators were no better than ordinary wanderers when faced with this kind of flintlock. The middle-aged cultivator prayed in his heart. He hoped that the Holy Dragon City had a limited number of bullets and would not dare to use this kind of flintlock rashly. Otherwise, it would be a disaster for Black Rock City. Behind the middle-aged cultivator, the cultivators from Black Rock City, who had always looked down on the other buildings, were now staring with their eyes wide open. Their faces were filled with shock. What they had seen and heard as soon as they entered the sacred Dragon Valley had shattered their arrogance and conceit. While they were shocked, they also put away their self-righteousness and became honest. Before entering the Holy Dragon City, he had thought that they were from poor families, but after entering the Holy Dragon City, he realized that he was the one who had entered the city like a mountain cannon. This huge psychological gap filled the hearts of the cultivators of Black Rock City with depression. It was also at this moment that Qian Long led the Holy Dragon City's cultivators over. After the cultivators from Black Rock City sized them up, they wailed in their hearts. "Your Holy Dragon City is showing off your wealth. Is this how you treat your guests?" Your Holy Dragon City's cultivators are treated so well. How can we, the cultivators from Black Rock City, face others when we travel together? Your Holy Dragon City is so rich, so why do you still want those 20,000 level 2 brains? Do you lack this little bit of money? You guys are such bullies. The Holy Dragon City's cultivators battle team was independent and completely different from the Holy Dragon City's army. Their weapons and equipment were more personalized and of better quality so that they could display the cultivators' individual strengths. It was precisely because of Tangjin's reckless investment that the cultivators in Black Rock City felt increasingly envious. Cultivator battle teams were a type of troop type that consumed a lot of resources. In all the buildings, they accounted for a large part of the expenses. But even so, there was still no guarantee that the cultivators would have sufficient resources. Black Rock City was the best example of this. Due to the scarcity of cultivation resources, Black Rock City had always implemented a competitive system. It even encouraged cultivators to defeat their opponents by hook or by crook in order to obtain limited cultivation resources. In addition, the internal affairs of Black Rock City were now rotten to the core. The authoritative figures in the management had almost monopolized all the cultivation resources to strengthen the power of the main family. This had also caused the cultivation resources of the cultivators in Black Rock City to become increasingly scarce. Their weapons couldn't be replaced or maintained, and their armors and protective gear could only be repaired simply. Their various supplementary equipment couldn't be repaired either. Now that they were standing together with Thousand Dragons and the other Holy Dragon City cultivators, they were far inferior to the Holy Dragon City in terms of appearance. A man depends on his clothes and a horse depends on his saddle. In this aspect, the cultivators from Black Rock City were completely defeated. Seeing the awkwardness in their senior and junior brothers' eyes, the cultivators from Black Rock City had mixed feelings. Other than their deep envy for the cultivators from Holy Dragon City, they also felt a deep resentment towards the children of the rich and powerful in Black Rock City. It could be said that the cultivators from Black Rock City who were sent as emissaries this time were a group of people that the nobles of Black Rock City did not like. This was why they were assigned this mission and had to risk passing through the blockade of the Corpse Army to Holy Dragon City to ask for help. As for their own sons, nephews, and descendants, they all remained in Black Rock City and waited for the arrival of reinforcements. The cultivators were full of complaints about the actions of the influential officials of Black Rock City, but they did not dare to stand up and resist. However, their families were living in Black Rock City. If they offended these nobles, they would most likely be chased out of the tower and left to fend for themselves in the endless wilderness. Now that they saw the Holy Dragon City's harmonious scene, with strong troops and abundant resources, they were all secretly envious. Tangjin did not know the inner thoughts of these Black Rock City cultivators. However, he could see their unblinking eyes that were filled with yearning and envy. The corner of Tangjin's mouth gently revealed a faint smile. He turned his head and glanced at little Rui in the group. After giving a meaningful glance, he continued to lead the way for the middle-aged cultivator and the rest. After little Rui saw the signal sent by Tangjin, he struggled for a moment in his heart. He couldn't help but feel a little hesitant. However, after a while, he clenched his fists tightly and his eyes became more and more determined. As the cultivators from Black Rock City were not residents here, Tangjin arranged for them to stay in a temporary tent. After leaving Tai Sing to entertain them, he turned around and returned to his study room to continue his research. Soon, it was time to eat. The residents of Holy Dragon City came back from work and began to line up to go to the cafeteria. At Tai Sing's invitation, the cultivators of Black Rock City also headed to the dining hall for a meal. Because the living space in Luqing was a little tight, the dining hall of the Holy Dragon City was built on the edge of the square. It was a large colored steel shed. When they arrived at the canteen, they saw the residents getting their food in an orderly manner. the cultivators of Black Rock City followed the local customs. Each of them held a plate and stood at the back of the line. After more than 10 minutes, it was the middle-aged cultivator's turn. After he served the plate, the chef looked at him and filled his plate with food. The middle-aged cultivator looked at the food and could not help but ask a Holy Dragon City resident beside him, "Brother, do you usually eat these?" The Holy Dragon City resident glanced at the middle-aged cultivator's plate and shook his head. "Aren't you tired of eating these every day? We change the menu every 3 days. There's chicken, fish, eggs, and everything. By the way, there are many bowls over there. If you want to drink sugar water or tea, you can pour them yourself." This Holy Dragon City resident treated the middle-aged cultivator as a new resident and even gave him some advice. "Oh, thanks, brother." The middle-aged cultivator nodded and went to the stainless steel bucket. He tasted the tea and poured himself a big cup of tea. The middle-aged cultivator returned to his table under the colored steel canopy. He stared at his plate but didn't eat. This wasn't because the middle-aged cultivator was afraid that there was something wrong with the food, but because he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The Holy Dragon City's residents actually had such sumptuous meals. There were large pieces of red braised pork, deep-fried dried fish, a few small pickled vegetables, and crystal-clear rice. The fragrance assailed the nose and looked extremely tempting. Although he was the head instructor of Black Rock City's cultivators, he did not receive such treatment. His usual meals were mostly grass seed rice, Black Rock City's insect meat, and a bowl of light mushroom soup. Up.dfrm no/v/e/lb/i/n.co/m. He had been eating this food for decades, and the middle-aged cultivator had almost forgotten the taste of other food. However, Holy Dragon City's food was indeed delicious. Back when he was traveling in the wilderness, he had tasted many delicacies. However, compared to Holy Dragon City's food, he always felt that they were lacking. The middle-aged cultivator didn't know that Tangjin had added various seasonings to the food from his original world. Compared to the dry cooking method in the world of Lucheng, it was naturally much more delicious. The middle-aged cultivator picked up a spoon and gently scooped up a piece of rice. He had a taste and found that it tasted very good. It was not as hard to swallow as the grass seed rice, and was a very good staple food. After tasting the rice, the middle-aged cultivator took a bite of the red braised meat. His mouth was filled with fragrance, and his appetite increased greatly. Not long after, the cultivators of Black Rock City returned to the table with a full plate of food. They looked at each other and began to gobble down their food. After finishing the meal, drinking a bowl of sugar water or tea, that feeling was really comfortable. The meal left all the cultivators' mouths full of oil and their stomachs round. They were all secretly envious of the Holy Dragon City's residents being able to eat such delicious food every day. After the meal, Taising rushed over again and began to lead the cultivators of Black Rock City for a walk in the valley. From time to time, he would introduce them to the various scenic spots in Holy Dragon City. After a period of rest and construction, the Holy Dragon Valley had become more and more beautiful and pleasant. There were birds chirping and flowers everywhere, and the desolation and barrenness of the wilderness outside could not be seen at all. Stepping on the soft carpet-like grass, the middle-aged cultivator pointed at the mother tree and asked Taising, "May I ask, Chief Taising, that giant tree looks extraordinary. What's its background?" Taising smiled and said with a face full of pride, "I won't hide it from you. This giant tree is called the Mother Tree. It's a second-grade auxiliary city of our Holy Dragon City. This mother tree is very mystical and has many unexpected abilities. Especially at night, the mother tree would naturally emit a 7-colored fluorescent light, illuminating the area covered by its crown with an incomparably beautiful light. It's useless no matter how much I say. You can enjoy it yourself tonight." As Tai Sing spoke, his face was filled with an uncontainable pride. After walking around Holy Dragon City, the cultivators of Black Rock City returned to their tents to rest. Today, the Holy Dragon City had seen and heard too much, which had greatly stimulated them. The cultivators needed some time to digest it. Everything was afraid of comparison. After today's experience, the Blackstone cultivators had begun to feel dissatisfied with their past lives. At the same time, they hoped that they and their families could also live in the enviable environment of Holy Dragon City. Read lat.stchpters on n/v/l/b.i.cm. Once grass grew in the heart, it was difficult to remove it. Instead, it would become more and more luxuriant under the nourishment of desire. The middle-aged cultivator saw through his disciples' thoughts but did not say anything. Deep down, he was also filled with envy for the living environment in the Holy Dragon City. As a middle-aged cultivator who was not adept at political tactics, he devoted himself to cultivation and teaching his disciples. He did not have a good life in Black Rock City. Although he had contributed a lot to Black Rock City, the benefits he received were only average. Even the wife and brother of the governor of Black Rock City received benefits that were one level higher than his. This kind of seemingly unfair thing was not uncommon in Black Rock City. The middle-aged cultivator was obsessed with cultivation and had very low standards of living. He was also grateful to the previous governor for supporting him in his travels in the wilderness. Even after suffering from many years of unfair treatment, he still did his best to cultivate generations of cultivators in Black Rock City. However, in the past 2 years, his wife and children had been complaining more and more about him. They said that he, as the Grand Chief Instructor of Cultivators in Black Rock City, received the same welfare treatment as the grandson of an elder in Black Rock City. As a result, his family was now as poor as water, and he had to make careful calculations for his life. The middle-aged cultivator was annoyed and could only grit his teeth and ask to see the governor of Black Rock City. He tactfully raised his request to increase the level of the residence. However, the governor of Black Rock City's reply made the middle-aged cultivator's heart sink. At that time, the governor of Black Rock City had a troubled look on his face. He claimed that as the governor of a city, he had to consider all the citizens of Black Rock City and follow the rules of Black Rock City. This kind of matter of increasing the level of residence had to be discussed by the elders before they could make a decision. Therefore, he asked the middle-aged cultivator to go back and wait for the news. The middle-aged cultivator had no choice but to return to his home and wait silently. In the end, there was no news of him upgrading his resident level. Instead, he heard that the 3-year-old grandson of an elder had obtained the qualification to upgrade his resident level. A 3-year-old child actually had a higher status than him. This made the middle-aged cultivator very angry. He went to the governor of Black Rock City again to demand an explanation, but he was regretfully informed that after the elders' discussion, they felt that the middle-aged cultivator did not have the qualifications to upgrade his status as a resident for the time being. They wanted him to go back and continue waiting. At the same time, the governor of Black Rock City also gave the middle-aged cultivator a warning. He told him to put in more effort in cultivating the cultivators of Black Rock City and not to be selfish and always think about his own benefits. The middle-aged cultivator was furious when he heard this. He immediately questioned the governor of Black Rock City. How could a 3-year-old child have a higher social status than him? On the other hand, he had worked hard for Black Rock City for many years, only to be called selfish. The governor of Black Rock City's face turned gloomy after being questioned by the middle-aged cultivator. He snorted coldly and ordered the middle-aged cultivator to leave without giving any explanation. It was also after that incident that the middle-aged cultivator was given the cold shoulder by all the influential people in Black Rock City. If not for his high cultivation level and his ability to educate his disciples, he would have been driven out of Black Rock City by a scheme. It was also after that incident that the middle-aged cultivator's hair turned white overnight and he became depressed. As he recalled all the injustice that had happened to him in the past, a flame seemed to burn in the depths of the middle-aged cultivator's eyes. Late at night, by the Pearl Lake, Tang Jin stood on the shore with his hands behind his back. He looked at the scale-like ripples on the lake's surface under the reflection of the bright moon and seemed to be deep in thought. After watching for a long while, Tang Jin finally opened his mouth and softly said, "Are you hesitating? Do you not know if Black Rock City will be destroyed if we continue to work together?" Xiao Rui slowly walked out from the shadows, his tone carrying a hint of hesitation. "You're right, I'm indeed hesitating." Tang Jin shook his head and sighed softly. Black Rock City is already rotten to the core and the citizens have long been complaining. How long do you think this place can last? At this point, can't you see that Holy Dragon City will not allow Black Rock City to continue to exist? One day, I will wipe Black Rock City from this area, right? Little Rui looked at Tang Jin, who was standing with his hands behind his back. He lowered his head and was silent for a moment before he spoke. "I don't care about the lives of the nobles in Black Rock City. I'm only concerned about the citizens. Once Black Rock City is destroyed, what should they do? Are they going to become homeless wanderers struggling to survive in the wilderness?" Tang Jin coldly laughed when he heard this. He turned to look at little Rui and snorted, "You're underestimating Holy Dragon City too much. Even if there were 10 times more survivors from Black Rock City, Holy Dragon City could still easily support them." "Is that true?" Xiao Rui was delighted and asked. "I have no need to lie to you about this matter. However, Holy Dragon City only accepts residents who are willing to join us. I will not take in any of those who still have feelings for Black Rock City. When it's time to make a choice, they'll have to decide for themselves." As Tang Jin was speaking, he walked in front of Xiao Rui and gently patted his shoulder. He said in an encouraging tone, "I think highly of you, so I'm giving you a chance. Compared to a place like Black Rock City, Holy Dragon City is the stage for you to fulfill your ambitions. When you return this time, you must contact your fellow disciples and think of a way to get them to join your camp. At the same time, you have to tell them that only in Holy Dragon City will they have the rich life they want, as well as fair and sufficient cultivation resources. Black Rock City will become history. In the future, the overlord of this region will only be Holy Dragon City." Xiao Rui nodded his head, then laughed at himself and sighed, "Looking at the current situation, I don't seem to have any reason to refuse, nor do I have any room for retreat." Tang Jin shook his head. "You don't have to blame yourself. Everything you did today was for the sake of the citizens of Black Rock City. After they join Holy Dragon City, they will be grateful to you from the bottom of their hearts." Xiao Rui turned around and left. As he walked, he said in a low voice, "I don't know if I'm doing the right thing, but I hope it's as you say." Tang Jin looked at little Rui's back as he left. After which, his gaze swept to a certain corner as an inexplicable smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. Xiao Rui was feeling conflicted, and this caused him to lower his guard. If he was walking at night, he would be on high alert and carefully observe his surroundings to prevent any accidents from happening. However, it was different today. His mind was filled with a mess of thoughts. The fate of the countless citizens of Black Rock City was in his hands. He could not help but feel as if he was carrying a mountain on his back. He was at a loss as to where he should go. Out of personal hatred, he could not wait for the nobles of Black Rock City to be killed. That way, he could avenge his parents' grievances. However, when he thought of the destruction of Black Rock City and the countless men and women of all ages who had no home to return to, forced to face their unknown fates, he felt a deep sense of guilt as a participant in this operation. The more Xiao Rui thought about it, the more annoyed he became. In the end, he waved his fist fiercely, his face filled with determination. "Let's not care about that. I've already done my best. Everything I've done is for their sake. As for what the future will be like, it's up to God. After making this decision in his heart, the gloominess on Xiao Rui's face disappeared. It was also at this moment that he suddenly realized that behind him, there was a shadow that had been hiding in the darkness, moving like a shadow. Xiao Rui was shocked and immediately turned around to look at the stalker. However, when he saw the person's face, he felt his heart beat wildly and his blood vessels expanded as if they could burst at any time. "Teacher, why didn't you rest?" Xiao Rui bowed to the middle-aged cultivator behind him. His attitude was very respectful, but his muscles were completely tensed up. Although the middle-aged cultivator's cultivation was far above his, as long as he could withstand one blow and not die, his sister could definitely find Tangjin for help. This way, her life would be guaranteed. From Xiao Rui's point of view, the middle-aged cultivator was a die-hard fan of Black Rock City. He must have heard and seen everything that happened tonight. If nothing went wrong, the middle-aged cultivator would definitely kill him. After all, what he needed to do was to cooperate with Tangjin to topple Black Rock City. Although he did not need to use any weapons, this kind of internal division that killed without seeing blood would give Black Rock City a fatal blow at a critical moment. All sorts of thoughts swirled in his mind as he prepared to fight to the death. The middle-aged cultivator looked at Xiao Rui, who was bowing. After a moment of silence, he sighed. "Xiao Rui, why do you have to do this?" Xiao Rui's body trembled when he heard this and tears appeared at the corner of his eyes. He suddenly recalled his past. After his parents were killed by the elder of Black Rock City, it was the middle-aged cultivator who took care of him. This allowed Xiao Rui to continue cultivating and even possess the strength of a level 3 cultivator. Could it be that he was going to completely part ways with this middle-aged cultivator who was both a master and a father tonight? He didn't expect that before his plan could be implemented, he would lose the person closest to him. This feeling made Xiao Rui extremely hesitant and angry. He even wanted to roar out to vent his anger, but he could only suppress it in his heart. However, before he attacked, he wanted to try his best, hoping that the middle-aged cultivator would understand his painstaking efforts. "Did you hear the conversation between the Holy Dragon City Master and I just now?" Xiao Rui straightened his back and asked the middle-aged cultivator. Then, he stared at the middle-aged cultivator without blinking until he nodded. Seeing this, Xiao Rui laughed bitterly and cupped his hands at the middle-aged cultivator. "Teacher above, disciple has some words that have been held in my heart for a long time, and I can't not spit them out. The moon is bright and the stars are few tonight. It's a good time to talk about life, so I'll tell you what's in my heart." Seeing the middle-aged cultivator nod slightly, Xiao Rui continued. "You're about the same age as my parents, and you were also a member of the cultivator battle team. I believe you know my parents very well." After seeing the middle-aged cultivator nod his head, Xiao Rui's expression turned sad and his tone was filled with indignation. "It's a pity that my parents risked their lives for Black Rock City and gave up on the small family for the big picture. In the end, they were framed by those influential people and not even their bones were left. After our parents were killed by an evil man, what happened to us siblings was obvious to all. If it wasn't for sister's hard work to support the family, if it wasn't for the help of some kind-hearted people, we would have long been swallowed up. May I ask why I'm grateful to such a place? Why do I have to sacrifice for it and let my enemy enjoy the resources that I've exchanged my blood for?" Xiao Rui was filled with righteous indignation. His face was filled with pain and unwillingness. He looked at the middle-aged cultivator and continued in a hoarse voice, "There are more than 1 or 2 citizens of Black Rock City who have suffered the same fate as me." Who owes whom? The current Black Rock City has completely changed. From a happy village that countless wanderers would die to enter, it has turned into a hell that mercilessly extorted the blood and sweat of its residents to satisfy the selfish desires of the rich and powerful. I don't want to endure, and I don't intend to endure anymore. Xiaorui pointed at the Holy Dragon Valley below them. I believe you can see the Holy Dragon City's potential even without me saying. This place is surrounded by giant peaks and has giant city walls as protection. The valley is vast and filled with unprecedented high-yield crops. The residents are happy and the soldiers are strong. City Lord Tang is a man of great talent and bold vision. He is determined to build a human city that has been passed down for 10,000 years. With a city like this, the human race will no longer be a group of loose sand. We will have a strong force to rely on, and the non-humankind will not dare to bully us. By then, our children won't need to worry about food and clothes. We can enjoy our old age. When we see those pagans' caravans, we won't need to be vigilant or bow to them like before. The more Xiaorui spoke, the more excited he became. His face was flushed red. He looked at the middle-aged cultivator and said indignantly, "Moreover, teacher, was your experience fair at all? You've given your all for Black Rock City. For decades, you've spent almost all of your efforts to train the cultivators of Black Rock City. But now, look at what you've gained in return. Your family's financial situation is average, not much better than ordinary residents. It would be fine if you were an ordinary citizen, but you're not. You're the Grand Chief Instructor of Cultivators in Black Rock City who personally trained the most powerful army in Black Rock City. But you're in such an important position, yet your welfare is not as good as a 3-year-old child's. This unfair experience has made many cultivators of the Black Lava Dukedom angry, but they don't dare to say anything because of their power. Teacher, are you really willing to accept this?" Xiaorui looked at the middle-aged cultivator. Faced with Xiaorui's question, the middle-aged cultivator in the shadows was speechless for a long time. After a long time, he said softly, "I can't accept this." Xiaorui was overjoyed and continued to bewitch him. "Then why don't you switch to Holy Dragon City, teacher? With your strength, Holy Dragon City will definitely give you a position that will satisfy you. At the very least, it will be much stronger than Black Rock City. Moreover, you've always been at the threshold of advancing to rank 5, but you've been unable to advance because you don't have enough resources. Once you reach Holy Dragon City, you won't have to worry about these problems and can smoothly advance to rank 5. The middle-aged cultivator nodded and said softly, "Although you have your own goals, some words are not wrong. The development potential of Holy Dragon City far exceeds that of Black Rock City. This is an undeniable fact. City Lord Tang is also a good person. He has strength and ambition. He is a formidable character. You might not know, but he had long discovered my existence. He just didn't call me out. What he said to you was also for me." Xiaorui's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. His eyes rolled around slightly, and he chuckled. The master and disciple talked for a long time under the moonlight before they finally returned to the tent together. After they left, Tangjin turned off the quantum invisibility light screen. His figure slowly appeared not far away with a smile on his face. Compared to Xiaorui, who was a nobody in Black Rock City, the middle-aged cultivator's influence was much stronger. Almost 80% of the cultivators in Black Rock City were his students. This was a force that could completely overturn Black Rock City. As long as the middle-aged cultivator cut ties with Black Rock City at the crucial moment, Tangjin would be satisfied. Once they lost the support of the middle-aged cultivator and the majority of the Black Lava cultivators, the nobles of Black Rock City would be unable to do anything and would not be able to cause any trouble. Even though they had controlled most of the cultivation resources in Black Rock City for many years and had also nurtured a few powerful juniors, they were still not worth mentioning when faced with the middle-aged cultivator and the others who had the support of Tangjin. If the influential people of Black Rock City were reasonable, Tangjin would not mind letting them live. If they did not know what was good for them, then what awaited them would be the merciless blades of the Holy Dragon City's soldiers. Tang Jin had never hoped that these pampered fellows would be willing to admit defeat. Therefore, the most likely scenario would be to use blades to resolve the problem, using fresh blood to tell them an indisputable fact. From now on, Holy Dragon City would be the only dominant force in the area within 100 miles. Black Rock City was destined to become history. He hoped that everything would go according to plan and that nothing would go wrong. Stepping on the green grass that was illuminated by the moonlight, Tang Jin slowly walked toward the mother tree that appeared incomparably holy under the moonlight. He allowed the seven-colored starlight that scattered from the leaves to fall onto his shoulder. The mother tree had a special ability to calm one's mind. Whenever Tang Jin felt that his thoughts were a little chaotic, he would come to the mother tree's treehouse. It did not take long for him to become refreshed. Time passed by slowly, and in the blink of an eye, it was the morning of the third day. The sun had just risen, and the Holy Dragon City's warriors were in high spirits as they began to get busy. Everyone had an excited expression on their faces. The members of the Cultivator Battle Squad were also arranging their own equipment. Each of them had a cold expression on their faces. Under the envious gazes of the cultivators from Black Rock City, they took out their personal belongings one by one to inspect and maintain them. After they were done, they stood quietly to the side. After a while, Tang Jin and the others appeared. The Holy Dragon City soldiers were lined up in an orderly manner. All of them were staring at the front without blinking, waiting for Tang Jin's orders. The cultivators from Black Rock City stood to one side. Although they had seen the strength of the Holy Dragon City's army, they were still affected by the fearless aura of the Holy Dragon City's soldiers gathered in the square, each of them filled with fighting spirit. The so-called imposing momentum should be referring to the scene in front of them. Tang Jin stood in the middle of the square with Tai Seng and Qianlong standing on his left and right. Looking at the Holy Dragon City army and cultivator battle team before them, they nodded their heads in satisfaction. This time, we're not trying to save anyone by dispatching troops to fight against the corpse race, nor are we coveting any benefits. Our goal is to completely wipe out the corpse race from this land, so that they won't have any place to stand anymore. Tang Jin's tone was firm and his voice was sonorous and forceful. He glanced at the Holy Dragon City's soldiers, who were full of fighting spirit, and pounded his chest with his fists. May my Holy Dragon City prosper for 10,000 generations and be invincible. I'm willing to use my flesh and blood to build the immortal foundation of the human race. I'm willing to use the blood of the non-human kind to mark the glory of our human race. Anyone who stands in the way of our great human race will be completely wiped out with the force of a thunderbolt. When the Holy Dragon City soldiers heard this, they immediately shouted loudly, their excited voices reverberating in the Holy Dragon Valley. Tang Jin glanced at the Holy Dragon City's soldiers, whose fighting spirit had been completely ignited, before turning to look at Tai Seng, who immediately understood and walked forward. Withdraw all the chariots. Warriors of each combat team, quickly enter the chariots that belong to you and wait for the departure order. Logistics vehicles, supply vehicles, medical vehicles, and all other personnel, immediately go forward to receive your weapons for self-defense. Along with Tai Seng's order, a series of rumbles came from the cave. The cultivators from Black Rock City looked at the cave where the sound came from in shock. In the few days that they had been in Holy Dragon City, they had not been allowed to enter the cave to look around. Now that they heard the roar, they all stretched their necks, wanting to see what was hidden in the cave and why it was making such a loud and ear-piercing noise, as well as the faint black smoke drifting out. After the Wasteland War Chariot left the cave, all the cultivators from Black Rock City were dumbfounded. Looking at the huge and ferocious Wasteland War Chariot, the cultivators of Black Rock City were speechless and their eyes became dull. In their previous life experiences, they had never come into contact with a motor vehicle, not to mention that it was a wasteland tank that was specially designed and modified for combat. The strong visual impact caused the cultivators of Black Rock City to have a deep sense of awe. With such a powerful combat beast, Holy Dragon City naturally did not fear any enemy. Unknowingly, the cultivators of Black Rock City were once again filled with a strong sense of envy. They had a new understanding of Holy Dragon City's power. A long war chariot drove into the Holy Dragon City square. The warriors quickly entered the back carriage of the war chariot according to their respective groups. They sat quietly on the chairs and waited for the war chariot to set off. Looking at the mighty wasteland war chariots, the cultivators of Black Rock City had just stopped praising them when they were stunned by the scene in front of them. A group of ogres wearing steel armor slowly walked over. They were like moving city walls. The armor on their bodies was beautifully designed and made with excellent craftsmanship. It had extremely strong defense. Wearing this expensive heavy armor, the originally perverted ogres became meat grinders on the battlefield. Looking at the giant spiked clubs in their hands, the Black Rock City cultivators felt their facial muscles twitching. This Holy Dragon City was indeed extraordinary. It could actually tame ogres and even plan to send them to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Get latest level CHPters on NVE/LBJ/N.C/M. Putting everything else aside, just the fact that the Holy Dragon City could use a large amount of resources to tame the ogres and create so many giant heavy armors for them showed the Holy Dragon City's foundation. It was not that Black Rock City had never thought of taming the monster. They had tried to do so once, but the terrifying amount of resources invested had eventually made the nobles of Black Rock City give up on the plan because they could not afford to waste any more resources. The Holy Dragon City, which was only level 2, had managed to achieve this. With the experience of successfully taming ogres and the support of the resources of the Holy Dragon City, it would not be difficult to build a monster army. Looking at the ogres standing behind the big bear like obedient babies, then looking at the weapons and equipment on them, the cultivators of Black Rock City all had one thought, that is, never encounter these guys on the battlefield. After the ogres arrived, Tai Seng ordered the fleet to set off. The cultivators from Blackstone City were arranged to board a military transport vehicle and follow behind the convoy. They would set off together with the battlefield. To their surprise, there was a strange metal object fixed to the open military transport vehicle. It had a solid support and a thick iron pipe pointing diagonally to the sky. The cultivators of Black Rock City whispered to each other as they tried to guess the use of this item. It was a pity that their knowledge was limited. They usually only wandered around the vicinity of Black Rock City and were absolutely unable to identify a war weapon like the super light howitzer. However, the middle-aged cultivator had once seen the cannons used by the alien races when he was young. However, those cannons were clumsy, and although they were powerful, they could not be moved. They could only be used to defend buildings. Although he could vaguely guess the use of the super light howitzer, he did not dare to make a conclusion. As the convoy slowly moved forward, the residents of Holy Dragon City spontaneously stood on both sides of the road, watching the soldiers rush to the battlefield. Unlike the other towers, every time the Holy Dragon City's soldiers set off for battle, the residents would be in high spirits. This was because they believed that under Tang Xin's leadership, the final victory would definitely belong to the Holy Dragon City. The soldiers that set off would also return safely. When the convoy drove out of the city gate, a loud and clear slogan suddenly sounded. The cultivators of Black Rock City raised their heads and looked back. They saw the Holy Dragon City's soldiers on the city wall, who were responsible for guarding the city, solemnly bowing to the carriages. Their faces were filled with solemnity and yearning. They were different from their comrades who went to the battlefield to kill the enemy. Their duty was to protect their homes and ensure the safety of Holy Dragon City. Although they were not as happy as their comrades, they did not feel discouraged at all. They would be proud of any battle achievements that their comrades obtained. In the wilderness, the Holy Dragon City's chariots slowly advanced. This was Tangjin's first time returning to the vicinity of Blackrock City ever since he set off for the Holy Dragon Valley to build the tower. He could not help but feel a little emotional as he looked at the scenery along the way. It had been some time since he had come to the Tower World. Through Tangjin's continuous efforts, he had now successfully owned a level 2 tower and had thousands of residents. He also had the strength to rule this region. Although the process of building the city was filled with hardships, Tangjin still enjoyed himself. At this moment, Tangjin finally had the foundation to realize his dream. Starting from the land under his feet, his Holy Dragon City would control an increasingly large area. At the same time, the Holy Dragon City would also continue to upgrade the level of its towers, closing the distance between them and the legendary top-tier towers. He believed that with the resources and talent supply of his original world, this dream would become a reality in a short time. Tangjin believed that he would definitely be able to see this scene in his lifetime. As the convoy continued to approach the area controlled by the undead race, the scene in front of them became more and more desolate. White bones covered the field, and there were often sporadic undead monsters attacking the convoy. A few Holy Dragon City soldiers were sitting in the pickup truck with rifles in their hands. Whenever they saw a zombie approaching, they would immediately open fire and kill it, then take out its brain and throw it into their pockets. Along the way, the gunshots did not stop. Seeing the Holy Dragon City soldiers continuously shooting at the corpse monsters, the middle-aged cultivator finally confirmed his guess. Holy Dragon City's war chariots must have carried sufficient ammunition, which was why they could fire without any worries. They were not worried about running out of ammunition. The cultivators of Blackrock City had witnessed the power of firearms. Monsters below level 3 had no way of resisting the bullets of these firearms. Their heads were easily split open. The weapons on the battlefield were extremely powerful. Read the latest stories on novilbin.com. This was the evaluation given by the cultivators of Blackrock City regarding firearms. At the same time, they were extremely envious of the Holy Dragon City's soldiers, who each had an automatic rifle. However, they were also very clear that they had no fate with this kind of weapon for killing monsters. They were just looking at it for fun. No force would allow this kind of highly lethal and expensive firearms to be leaked out. The convoy had been traveling for almost 5 hours, and the distance to Blackrock City was getting closer and closer. When it was mealtime, the chariots slowly stopped. Soon, some warriors jumped out of the chariots and used steel welding tools to set up a simple defensive position. Tangjin was wearing a camouflage suit and a pair of black sunglasses as he jumped down from a military jeep. He looked around and sat on a simple folding chair. He waved at the middle-aged cultivator and Xiao Rui. The two of them walked up and sat down at the table. Tangjin pointed at the tea on the table and indicated for the two of them to drink it as they wished. Soon after, he picked up his teacup and gently took a sip. The middle-aged cultivator picked up his cup and slowly savored it. He really liked this kind of bitter drink. In the past 2 days in Holy Dragon City, drinking tea had become his greatest enjoyment. The taste of the tea was bitter, similar to the ups and downs of his life. He didn't know if there would be a day when the bitterness would come to an end. Xiao Rui didn't really like this kind of tea with a bitter taste. He preferred the candied water in the Holy Dragon City's cafeteria. It was sweet and delicious. He would drink a few bowls every time he ate. Ever since his parents had been killed, he and his sister had not had a day where they were well fed. Although he was not hungry because of his sister's hard work, the simple life made him hate the rich and powerful people of Blackrock City even more. Tangjin finished his tea and placed the teacup to the side. Looking at the black smoke that was slowly rising in the distance, Tangjin smiled and turned to look at the middle-aged cultivator. He said softly, "Pardon my rudeness, but may I know your name, sir?" The middle-aged cultivator put down his teacup and replied with a smile, "You're too kind, City Lord Tang. You can just call me Mo Ran." After he finished speaking, he even bowed slightly, appearing very respectful. However, his attitude was still neither humble nor overbearing, and his bearing manner was outstanding. Tang Jin smiled and returned the greeting. After exchanging a glance with Mo Ran, the two of them understood and laughed out loud. "Mr. Mo Ran, I wonder which forces have the governor of Black Rock City invited to help us out of this predicament. Could you please tell us?" The middle-aged cultivator, Mo Yun, nodded his head. He dipped his finger in some tea and gently drew a line on the table. Soon after, he pointed at a simple map and said to Tang Jin, "Please take a look at this simple map, City Lord Tang." Tang Jin looked at the table when he heard this and waited for Mo Ran's explanation. The last time, the governor of Black Rock City sent out a total of 10 teams to request for help. However, it was confirmed that only 5 towers could come to Black Rock City to assist in the battle. One of them was your Holy Dragon City. Out of these 5 turreted cities, there are 3 second-level turreted cities. Other than your Holy Dragon City, there are also Redwater City and Earth Valley City. They are located behind Black Rock City and have always been in contact with Black Rock City. Other than that, there's also a level 3 city and a level 1 city. The level 3 city is known as Colossal Bone City. It possesses great combat power and is apparently planning to upgrade to a level 4 city so that it can rival Black Rock City. Their motive for sending troops to aid them in battle is unknown. As for that level 1 city tower, it's called Centauria Valley. It's said that it was built by a woman. Because this city tower was built not long ago, there wasn't much news about it. I only heard that the female city lord was very powerful. Mo Ran paused for a moment before he continued to point at the map. Other than the 5 towers that sent troops to help, the remaining towers not only refused to send troops to help, but they even formed an alliance. I wonder what they are planning. According to my analysis, the crisis of Black Rock City's destruction has given the surrounding forces a chance to grow stronger. It's just that most of them chose to wait and see. They will make new plans after the matter with the Corpse Clan is resolved. When Mo Ran said this, he raised his head and glanced at Tang Jin. Tang Jin nodded and said to Mo Ran, "This is also a very normal thing. It's a pity that their scope is still too small and they don't have enough confidence. They're destined to not be able to get a share of the pie in this banquet. Our Holy Dragon City is different from them. Not only do we have abundant resources and elite troops, but we've also been prepared to participate in this game for a long time. We view this land as our own. Anyone who wants to lay their hands on it must be mentally prepared to have their arms cut off." After saying this, Tang Jin turned his head and looked at Mo Ran. Tang Jin had long wanted to recruit this head instructor of Black Rock City, who had rich teaching experience and wasn't weak in the slightest. "Mr. Mo Ran, please forgive my bluntness. I'm afraid that Black Rock City will not be able to survive this disaster. Even if the Corpse Clan is annihilated, it does not mean that Black Rock City can rest easy. There are too many forces who want to replace them. You're in Black Rock City. You must make plans. When the nest is overturned, there will be no intact eggs. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for your family to prevent them from getting hurt unnecessarily. I admire Mr. Mo Ran's character and talent, so I promise you that as long as Mr. Mo Ran is willing to come to Holy Dragon City, I, Tang Jin, will warmly welcome you and give you the treatment you deserve." After Tang Jin finished speaking, he looked at Mo Ran without blinking. He didn't care about how Mo Ran and Xiao Rui had discussed it, nor did he care if the other party had agreed to Xiao Rui's plan. Tang Jin's words had made his attitude clear. He had also given Mo Ran face. In this way, even if Emoran joined Holy Dragon City in the future, it would be because of Tang Jin's warm invitation. As the saying goes, a fine bird chooses a tree to perch on. The way Black Rock City did things was not popular, but Emoran walked with dignity and was not afraid of anyone poking at his back. Emoran smiled but did not answer. He only cupped his hands in thanks. There were some things that didn't need to be said clearly. Everyone was very clear in their hearts. Besides, now was not the time to join Holy Dragon City, because he still had very important things to do. After the meal, the convoy set off again and went straight ahead. Emoyun told Tang Jin that the Five-City Alliance would gather at the Wanderer Market and attack the undead race. The former Wanderer Market had been completely abandoned after the undead race took control of the nearby areas. Many of the wanderers who originally lived there had turned into undead monsters and wandered around Black Rock City all day long. Tang Jin softly sighed after hearing this. However, he also knew that this was an inevitable matter. The Wanderers' Market was merely a place for the nobles of Black Rock City to amass wealth. They only cared about how many brain pearls they could earn, and did not care about the lives of ordinary wanderers. If Black Rock City had allowed these wanderers to seek refuge in the city when the undead clan attacked, they would not have been surrounded by the city today. This was because a large number of the undead monsters near Black Rock City were wanderers who were trying to survive near the tower. Black Rock City had their own difficulties, but that did not mean that they could leave them in the lurch. The reason why Black Rock City had its former glory was not only because of its own efforts, but also because these poor and lowly wanderers in their eyes had contributed a considerable part of their strength. If Black Rock City had taken in those wanderers back then, Tang Jin would have helped them disperse the Corpse Clan's troops even if he had to risk his life. Then, he would have brought these residents to Holy Dragon City. From Tang Jin's point of view, having sufficient residents was the greatest wealth. In the end, the nobles of Black Rock City watched on coldly from the side and chased away all the wanderers who were begging for mercy, allowing them to be chased and killed by the Corpse Clan. Tang Jin, who had originally viewed these wanderers as reserve residents, naturally did not have a good impression of Black Rock City. He also felt a chill in his heart when he saw the actions of the influential people in Black Rock City. Holy Dragon City would definitely not allow such a thing to exist. After he destroyed Black Rock City, he would definitely drive these guys into the endless wilderness and let them have a taste of that kind of pain that made them wish they were dead. Unknowingly, a high hill appeared in the distance, and there seemed to be a human figure flashing on it. Tang Jin knew that it was the old location of the Wanderer Market. However, the scene of people moving about had long disappeared. Now, only the broken protective wall and scattered white bones were left. As the Holy Dragon City's convoy gradually approached, more and more figures emerged from behind the ruins. These people pointed at the convoy, clearly very curious about the wasteland war chariots. Some of them even drew their bows and nocked their arrows, faintly aiming at the Holy Dragon City's convoy. Tang Jin looked at the unfriendly faces of the crowd and softly snorted. This group of people clearly saw the Black Rock City cultivators in front of the convoy, but they still did not withdraw their bows and arrows. It was obvious that they were hostile to Holy Dragon City. When the Holy Dragon City's convoy arrived at the entrance of the Wanderer Market, a few Lucheng warriors in leather armor blocked their way. They waved the swords in their hands and shouted for the warriors in the chariots to get off for inspection. On top of the wall, Lu Cheng's warriors were standing there to watch the fun. Tai Xing jumped down from a car and walked to the front of the Lucheng warriors who were blocking the car. He shouted with his eyes wide open, "Who are you? How dare you block my way?" The Lu City warrior who was blocking the way glanced at Tai Xing in disdain but didn't answer his question. Instead, he continued to wave his battle blade and ordered the Holy Dragon City warrior who was driving the vehicle to get out. At the same time, he used his battle blade to slash the chariot. The driver, who regarded these tanks as his life, was furious. Just as he was about to jump out of the vehicle to argue, he saw Tyson take out his pistol and pull the trigger at the Lucheng warrior. Bang! After the gunshot, all the onlookers turned pale with fright. The Lucheng warrior who was shot by Tyson clutched his chest and fell to the ground with a face full of shock and anger. All new Haptors NNV.com. Seeing the blood gushing out of the chest of the fallen Lucheng soldier, the other Lucheng soldiers immediately swung their swords at Tyson. Unfortunately, just as they raised their swords, they were shot down by the soldiers of the Holy Dragon City, all of them getting shot in their vital points. Looking at the warriors who were blocking the way, the onlookers were shocked and began to discuss in private. Did you see that? I told you that Holy Dragon City is not to be trifled with. However, the fools of the Colossal Bone Tower do not believe me. Since they can own such a strange metal carriage, how weak can they be? It's not like you don't know that the 3 armies that came to help have all been suppressed by the Colossal Bone Tower City. Black Rock City has yet to fall, but Colossal Bone Tower has already become the boss of this area. Stop talking. The City Lord of Colossal Bone City is here. The soldiers of Lucheng who were still talking in low voices shut their mouths at the same time and turned their eyes to the road not far away. A group of people was striding over from that direction, led by a strong man with a gloomy face. The brawny man walked to the entrance of the Wanderer Market. His face turned gloomier when he saw the warriors of Lucheng on the ground. He took 2 steps forward and shouted with a rough voice, "Holy Dragon City's City Lord, come out." Tang Jin walked out of the car with a cigarette in his mouth and stood in front of the City Lord. The Colossal Bone City's City Lord glanced at Tang Jin, a hint of fear flashing in his eyes. He had discovered that this young Holy Dragon City Lord in front of him actually had a 5th rank cultivation. Before Tang Jin's arrival, only the City Lord of Giant Bone City had a cultivation of rank 5 in the Wanderer Market. With the suppression of ranks and the powerful strength of Giant Bone City, the City Lords did not dare to say anything. Now that Tang Jin had come, this situation was likely going to be broken. The Giant Bone City Lord had already made up his mind to use his own cultivation and the Lu City army to suppress these City Lords. He would then be the supreme commander of the 5-city alliance. Before Tang Jin's arrival, he had used such a brutal method to make the City Lords of the other 3 towers yield temporarily. In the entire Wanderer Market, his Colossal Bone Tower was the only one that was the most powerful. Upon hearing that the Holy Dragon City's army had arrived, the City Lord of Colossal Bone City decided to play the same old trick, intending to show the Holy Dragon City their power. However, he had never thought that Holy Dragon City would be so difficult to deal with. In front of so many people, they had not given any face to Colossal Bone City and had even killed the soldiers who had blocked their way. At this moment, the City Lord of Giant Bone City suddenly felt as if he was riding a tiger and couldn't back down. He somewhat regretted his actions and had taken it for granted that Holy Dragon City was just a newly built city with no reputation. He thought that it would yield with a little pressure. Unexpectedly, this Holy Dragon City was not a soft persimmon, but a hard piece of iron. If he did not handle this matter well, not only would the Holy Dragon City not listen to his manipulation, but even the 3 towers that had surrendered before would also be out of his control. This was the last thing the City Lord of Colossal Bone City wanted to see. No matter what, he had to make the Holy Dragon City submit. Only then could he maintain his position as the leader. At that thought, the City Lord made up his mind. He looked at Tang Jin and snorted coldly. He pointed at the few corpses on the ground and said, "Your Holy Dragon City has gone too far. How dare you kill the warriors of my Giant Bone Tower? Are you trying to start a war? Today, if the Holy Dragon City does not hand over the murderer and use it to pay for the lives of the Giant Bone Tower's warriors, as well as give me a satisfactory explanation, then you don't need to enter this Wanderer Market. We will fight to the death here." Having said that, the City Lord immediately assumed a battle-ready stance. After hearing the words of the city lord of Colossal Bone City, Tangjin exhaled a mouthful of cigarette smoke and picked his ears with his hand. He then laughed in disdain. Are you done with your nonsense? If you are, then get out of my way. Don't block my way. I killed him, and I'm standing here. If you have the guts, come and kill me. Tangjin nonchalantly glanced at the city lord of Colossal Bone City with a disdainful and roguish expression. Tangjin's actions clearly showed that he didn't put the city lord in his eyes. The city master was enraged by this, and his eyes widened as a killing intent surged from his body, causing one to shiver in fear. Tangjin was the first to bear the brunt of the attack, but his expression did not change. He glanced at the city lord of Colossal Bone City and gently waved his hand. When the Holy Dragon City soldiers behind him saw this, they immediately loaded their guns and aimed at the unsheathed weapons of the Colossal Bone City soldiers behind him. Once the battle began, the warriors of the city would become their primary targets. The mayor of Colossal Bone City narrowed his eyes. His gaze swept across the automatic rifles in the hands of the Holy Dragon City warriors, and his pupils shrank. He also had some understanding of the power of this kind of flintlock. This Holy Dragon City stinky brat was really lucky to have so many flintlocks. Once they opened fire, he would definitely suffer a huge loss. As for himself, he had a rank 5 cultivation base, so he didn't have to worry. However, the brat in front of him also had a level 5 cultivation. With him holding him back, once the battle began, he would not be able to split himself and his subordinates would only be able to endure the beating. Thinking of this, the giant Bone City master's heart sank. He did not expect that ever since the Holy Dragon City appeared, he had been suppressed in every way. He could not fight, and it was too aggrieving to swallow his anger. What was the best solution? Many thoughts ran through the city master's mind, but he was unable to make up his mind. At the end of the day, the city lord had simply wanted to take advantage of the chaos to increase the city's strength, and it was a profitable business. With Tangjin's appearance, he could no longer gain any advantage. If he still intended to obtain the position of the 5 City Alliance's commander, this battle would be unavoidable. However, the losses incurred in this battle would definitely exceed the bottom line of the Colossal Bone City's lord. Should they fight this battle or not? Just as the city lord of Colossal Bone City was in a dilemma and both sides were ready to draw their swords, a slightly chubby man stepped forward. The man chuckled at Tangjin before turning to the city lord. Please calm down, both of you. There's no need to get so angry over such a small matter. Please listen to me. Tangjin turned his head to look at the chubby man and sized him up. The city lord of Colossal Bone City also did not say anything. The chubby man saw that the two of them did not speak, so he continued to smile and said, both sides are at fault in this matter. The warriors of the Tower of Giant Bone City should not have made the decision to inspect the Holy Dragon City's carriages, and the warriors of the Holy Dragon City should not have killed people as they pleased. However, with the enemy in front of us, I hope the two of you can consider the big picture. Wouldn't it be a joke if there is internal strife right after the 5 City Alliance has gathered? This army of the corpse race is fierce and brave. It's not a disaster that can be eliminated in a short time. Therefore, in the days to come, we must work closely with each other. We must not fall out because of this matter. The chubby man looked at the city lord after saying that. The city lord's face was as calm as still water. He stared at Tangjin for a moment before turning to the chubby man and saying, "The Lord of Redwater City is right. Let's put today's matter in mind and deal with it in the future." Humph. After the city lord finished speaking, he looked at Tangjin and coldly snorted. He then turned around and walked toward the center of the Wanderer Market. When the soldiers of the Tower City saw this, they sheathed their swords and turned to leave with faces full of resentment. Tangjin laughed in disdain as he looked at the back of the city lord of Colossal Bone City. If it wasn't for the fact that he still needed to use Colossal Bone City to fight against the corpse race, Tang Jin would have killed this fellow long ago and would not have allowed him to speak so much. This time, Tang Jin had already made up his mind to use this opportunity to establish the Holy Dragon City's strong image. He would not be the least bit polite to anyone who dared to provoke the Holy Dragon City. The city lord of Colossal Bone City wanted to use Holy Dragon City as a stepping stone to show off his might. He was truly blind. Tang Jin no longer paid attention to the leaving Giant Bone Tower's city lord. He cupped his hands towards the Scarlet Water City lord beside him and said with a faint smile, "I'm new here, I have to thank the Redwater City master for helping me out." The lord of Redwater City said that he did not dare to and then chatted with Tang Jin for a while. After the lord of Redwater City left, Jin Tang gestured to Tai Sing who was behind him and jumped into the military jeep. The convoy from the Holy Dragon City started moving again, slowly driving into the Wanderer Market. Under the gazes of countless warriors, they finally stopped in the middle of an open space. Fully armed Holy Dragon City soldiers jumped out of their war chariots and began to build a camp under Tai Sing's command. The eyes of the other Luqing soldiers who were watching from the side lit up. They were very envious of the excellent equipment of the Holy Dragon City soldiers, especially the flintlocks on their bodies, which were said to be worth at least thousands of brain beads. The soldiers of the city knew very well what a few thousand brain pearls meant. With the addition of excellent armor and the steel machetes at their waists, it meant that every Holy Dragon City soldier was a mobile human treasure vault. Envious and greedy gazes constantly swept across the Holy Dragon City's soldiers, the meaning of which was self-evident. The Holy Dragon City's soldiers turned a blind eye to these looks, and even sneered in their hearts, hoping that someone would come and find trouble. Just now, Big Boss Tyson already told us that we can't be cowards here. If we meet someone who doesn't know what's good for us, just beat them up. Even if we kill them by mistake, we don't have to worry. The Holy Dragon City will back us up. With these words, the Holy Dragon City's soldiers were full of confidence. However, now was not the time to deal with those ignorant people. Their biggest enemy now was the undead race wandering outside Black Rock City. As the Holy Dragon City's soldiers busied themselves, tents were set up one after another. Compared to the ugly tents of the other towers, the Holy Dragon City's camp stood out even more, causing the other towers' soldiers to point at them. At this moment, the city lords of the other 4 towers were also paying attention to the Holy Dragon City's movements. Discover EU chapters at novelby.co. Other than the Colossal Bone City Lord, who was so angry that his teeth were itching, and who wanted nothing more than to kill everyone in Holy Dragon City, the other 3 city lords were in a good mood. With Tang Jin's forceful appearance, the city lord's arrogance was immediately suppressed. When they thought of how he had suffered in silence but was unable to do anything, the 3 city lords couldn't help but secretly laugh. Not far from the Holy Dragon City's camp, the Scarlet Water City Lord and the Earth Valley City Lord were sitting together. Brother Scarlet Water, you have always been cautious. Why did you try to persuade the Holy Dragon City Master and the Giant Bone City Master to make peace when they are angry? Aren't you afraid of getting yourself into trouble? The Earth Valley City Master was an old man. He was short and strong, with rough skin and unusually wide hands. At this moment, he was looking at the Scarlet Water City Master with a puzzled face and asked the question that had been bothering him. The Lord of Redwater City smiled and took a sip of the vanilla juice before explaining. The only reason I'm doing this is because I see that the City Lord can't back down, so I'm giving him a way out. I'm also doing him a favor. The Earth Valley City Master nodded. After thinking back to the scene, he realized that the Giant Bone City Master had indeed been acting a little strange. Based on the strength he had displayed a few days ago, there was no reason for him to talk nonsense. He would probably make a move as soon as he came up. In that case, the Holy Dragon City Master should thank you. After all, you helped him out of his predicament. Little brother, your courage is extraordinary. I'm impressed. The Earth Valley City Lord thought for a moment and said to the Scarlet Water City Lord with a smile. He really admired the guts of the master of Redwater City. If it were him, he would never dare to step forward and persuade the two level 5 Lu Qingji when they were angry. The Lord of Redwater City shook his head with a wry smile after hearing the compliment from the Lord of Earth Valley City. If I'm not wrong, not only will the Holy Dragon City Master not be grateful to me, he will even blame me for being meddlesome and treat me as someone on the side of the Giant Bone City Master. Brother, don't you realize that despite his young age, the Holy Dragon City Master's strength is not inferior to the Colossal Bone City Master's? With the flintlock in his hand, it would not be an exaggeration to say that he is the strongest force in the alliance of 5 cities. At the entrance, if I hadn't stopped him, the Holy Dragon City Master would have really killed him. Speaking of this, the Lord of Redwater City wiped the cold sweat from his forehead with a serious expression. Soon, it was time to eat, and Holy Dragon City once again became the focus of everyone's attention. The alluring smell of food wafted out from the Holy Dragon City's campsite. The soldiers from the other cities who smelled the food all sniffled, trying to guess what kind of food the Holy Dragon City was eating. The Holy Dragon City's army chef lifted the lid of the pot and stirred it with a spoon a few times. The aroma became even more intense, and the soldiers of Luqing City who were closer to it could not help but drool. He could smell it but not eat it. This was too torturous. With a shout, the Holy Dragon City's warriors immediately picked up their plates and formed a long line to receive their food. Geet the L Testvels on no/v/elben, c/om. Looking at the oily, fat-toothed and fragrant pieces of meat and the sparkling rice, the Luqing Kingdom warriors couldn't help but swallow their saliva. After glancing at the grass seed cake in their hands, they lost their appetite. The fragrance drifted further and further away, attracting the attention of more Luqing Kingdom warriors. The warriors of the Holy Dragon City ignored the drooling onlookers. They walked to the dining table and began to eat, deliberately making chewing sounds. The surrounding Luqing warriors were chewing on the dried grass seed cake in their hands while drinking the bland vegetable soup. However, their eyes were fixed on the Holy Dragon City warriors' oily mouth, and the envy and jealousy in their hearts could not be described. After the meal, some Lu City soldiers invited Tangjin, saying that the 4 city lords wanted to discuss with him about the analysis of the enemy. Tangjin led a few guards and walked to the original management office of the Wanderer Market. It had been cleaned up and changed into the command office of the 5-city alliance. At this time, the city lords of the other 4 towers had arrived. They were gathered around a stone table, pointing at a map. Tangjin had just entered the house when the city lord of Colossal Bone City snorted coldly, but he did not say anything. Tangjin glanced around and noticed that a woman was also in the room. She must be the city lord of Hundred Flower Valley. Originally, he thought that since the Hundred Flower Valley's city lord could build a city, she should be a burly and tough woman. However, when he saw the Hundred Flower Valley's city lord's face, Tangjin was still stunned. The city master of Centauria Valley was wearing a red cloth robe with a set of exquisitely made elf battle armor on the outside, which outlined the curves of her body and made her look valiant and heroic. Her face was also very delicate, with clear contours and a heroic spirit. No matter from which angle, this Hundred Flower Valley city mistress was a standard beauty. No wonder all the men in the room kept stealing glances at her. When the Hundred Flower Valley's city lord saw Tangjin's unblinking gaze sizing her up, her embroidered brows slightly furrowed, but she did not say anything. After all, Tangjin's strength was there for all to see. She only had a rank 3 cultivation and did not dare to be too presumptuous. Tangjin was only curious about how this woman was able to build a city tower and did not have any other intentions. Shifting his gaze away from the face of the Hundred Flower Valley's city lord, Tangjin walked to the front of the table. He glanced at the contents of the map and could not help but frown slightly. From the information displayed on the map, Black Rock City was surrounded by an impenetrable siege. The cultivators from Black Rock City must have paid a huge price to break out of the corpse race's siege and ask for help. Tang Jin did not care about the losses of Black Rock City. What he cared about was how to get rid of the corpse race with the least cost. Although he was helping Black Rock City to get out of trouble in name, Tang Jin did not wish for Black Rock City to get out of trouble too soon. According to his plan, he should first wipe out the buildings of the corpse race before thinking about saving Black Rock City. Cut the weeds and eliminate the roots, striking the vital points. Tang Jin shifted his gaze away from the surroundings of Black Rock City. He recalled for a moment and pointed at a location on the map. Then, he used his finger to draw a circle. Tang Jin raised his head and glanced at the people around him. He softly said, "The reason why the Corpse Clan is so powerful is because of their infectious ability. If the source of the infection is not completely removed, the number of the Corpse Clan will only increase." Everyone's eyes were fixed on Tang Jin as he continued to narrate. "The place I'm pointing at is the base camp of the corpse race. There's a building that belongs to the corpse race there, and it's already a city. All of you are city lords, and you all know the way to advance Lu City, which is to sacrifice a large number of brain beads. For everyone, the accumulation of brain pearls is a long process, but for the corpse race, it's an easy task." Tang Jin paused when he said this. After drinking a mouthful of water, he continued to speak his thoughts. They can use the corpse monsters to kill monsters and obtain a large number of brain pearls. They can also use the method of raising venomous insects to let these corpse monsters continuously level up, and then remove their brain pearls. And what I'm most worried about is the ability of the Corpse Clan's Liu Cheng. It's fine if it's just a normal ability, but based on my understanding of the undead race, the buildings they build are probably not simple, so I think we should raise the undead race's buildings first." "You make a lot of sense," the city lord sneered. "But what makes you think you can back up your guess?" After hearing the city lord's question, no one said anything. Instead, they all looked at Tang Jin, wanting to know how he would answer. The truth was just as the city lord had said. If Tang Jin's words were based on mere speculation, then they would not be very convincing. The city lords would not change their target just because of a few words. Tang Jin glanced at the city master and snorted, "Since I've said so, I'll naturally have the facts as my basis. Perhaps you don't know, but the Corpse Clan came from another dimension. Their goal is obvious, which is to turn all living creatures into corpse monsters and control the entire surrounding area. The mastermind behind the undead race is called the Spiritual Brain Undead King. It has the cultivation of a Lord tier, and I've fought it once. It's definitely a tough bone to chew." Everyone was slightly shocked when they heard Tang Jin's story. The way they looked at Tang Jin immediately changed. They had some understanding of the strength of a Lord tier, which was a process of qualitative change. Ordinary cultivators had no chance of winning against a Lord tier opponent. Not only did the Holy Dragon City's city lord know the origin of the corpse race, but he had also fought with a Lord tier Spirit Brain Corpse King and successfully escaped. This was a symbol of strength in itself. These city lords imagined themselves running into a Lord tier monster, but they realized that they had no chance of escaping. The Colossal Bone City's city lord's expression was dark. He was considering the truth in Tang Jin's words. If what the other party said was true, the Holy Dragon City Lord's strength could not be underestimated. Although the two sides had enmity from the very beginning, that did not mean that they had to be in a state of mutual hostility, because that could easily lead to a spark, and the City Lord did not want to suffer unnecessary losses. This time, the City Lord of Colossal Bone City had a great plan in mind, and he could not afford to waste his combat power. After thinking up to this point, the City Lord did not say anything else and began to listen to Tang Jin's story. The other three city lords also chose to remain silent. Tang Jin gently laughed upon seeing this. He continued to explain his analysis. This Spirit Brain Corpse King has a strange ability, and it does things in the same way. However, based on my guess, the Corpse Clan's Liu Chang's ability is most likely to increase the strength of its communication with its original plane, so that it can mobilize reinforcements from the Corpse Clan's plane on a large scale. As long as the Corpse Clan city isn't destroyed, what we're doing will only be putting a stop to the boiling soup, and we might even miss the best opportunity to make a move. After Tang Jin said this, he looked at the 4 city lords and said in a deep voice, "Once the Corpse Clan becomes powerful, none of you here can escape the danger of destroying the city." Tang Jin wasn't trying to scare them. Black Rock City was a good example, and everyone was very clear about it. If the truth was as Tang Jin had said, then they would have to fight the Corpse Race's city. Otherwise, once the Corpse Race's power was established, they could forget about escaping by luck. However, the Undead City was guarded by Lord-tier monsters and was heavily guarded. It would be far more difficult to capture and destroy it than to break the siege on Black Rock City. Was it worth it? Everyone had their own selfish motives. The reason why these city lords agreed to help in the battle was because they had their own reasons, but no one would do a losing business. Tang Jin did not continue to speak as he looked at the 4 city lords, who had uncertain expressions. This was because he had already said all the information that he needed to say. As for how they would choose, it was up to these people. In fact, even if these 4 turreted cities did not send troops to attack the Corpse Race's turreted city, Tang Jin would not mind at all. At most, he would label them in his heart. After dealing with the Corpse Race and Black Rock City, he would slowly deal with them. There was a moment of silence before the Colossal Bone Pavilion Master finally spoke. "The purpose of our army this time is to help Black Rock City break out of its siege. Therefore, I will not attack the city of the Corpse Clan. I don't care what the others do." Having said that, the city lord sat down on a chair to the side, waiting for the other 3 city lords to make their stand. At this moment, he and Tang Jin were in opposing positions. He also wanted to see the choices of the other 3 city lords. The master of Chishui City rolled his eyes and took a few steps toward the master of Colossal Bone City. His attitude was self-evident. After seeing the choice of the Lord of Redwater City, the Lord of Earth Valley City hesitated for a moment. He smiled at Tang Jin and walked to the side of the Lord of Giant Bone City. Seeing the 2 level 2 city lords supporting her, Giant Bone City's city lord smiled and turned to look at the 100 Flower Valley's city lord. As long as this woman also supported him, Tang Jin would become a loner, and he would have the advantage. To the side, Tang Jin smiled and did not say anything. He also turned his gaze towards the 100 Flower Valley's city lord. Seeing that everyone's eyes had stopped on him, the 100 Flower Valley's city lord faintly smiled. He turned to look at Tang Jin and asked with a clear voice, "I have a few questions. I wonder if City Lord Tang can answer them?" After seeing Tang Jin gently nod his head, the 100 Flower Valley's city lord continued, "City Lord Tang, are you confident that you can get close to the tower guarded by the Corpse Race? Or are you confident that you can defeat the Spirit Brain Corpse King? As you said, the other party is a lord level. If they did not have enough confidence, Blossom Valley would not take this risk with you." After hearing the question raised by the 100 Flower Valley City Master, everyone understood her attitude. As long as Tang Jin had the confidence to destroy the Corpse Race's tower, then the 100 Flower Valley's tower would choose to follow Tang Jin. Otherwise, it would stay to help Black Rock City out of its predicament. The Colossal Bone City Lord's expression was a little ugly. However, he still looked at Tang Jin and waited for his reply. In fact, everyone present was very concerned about this question. They also wanted to know what methods Tang Jin had to destroy a city guarded by a Lord-tier monster. Through Tang Jin's methods, one could also judge the strength he possessed from the side. After all, everyone was the lord of a building in the same area. There were only benefits and no disadvantages in understanding each other's strength. Tangjin saw that everyone was looking at him. He chuckled, "Since you all want to see my methods, then please come with me." After saying these words, Tangjin took the lead and walked out of the house. The remaining 4 city lords exchanged glances and followed closely behind. Tangjin led the way while the 4 city lords and their guards followed behind. Not long after, they arrived at the Holy Dragon City's campsite. Under everyone's gaze, Tangjin walked to the front of the open military transport vehicle. Pointing at the super light howitzer on the car, Tangjin looked at everyone and said, "This is my method." Is everyone clear now? Most up-to-date NVELs are published on n0velgn.co/m. Looking at the super light howitzer fixed on the military transport truck, the 4 city lords looked at each other. They really could not figure out what the use of this metal frame was. On the other hand, Centauria Valley's city lord carefully sized up the super light howitzer, but did not say anything. The city lord walked up to the transport vehicle and looked at it with a blank expression. He then turned to Tangjin and said, "Forgive my poor eyesight, but may I ask what this is, City Lord Tang? How can it help you clear the corpse monsters outside the Corpse Clan's tower?" "This is my secret weapon. You'll see how effective it is soon." After Tangjin finished speaking, he waved his hand at the soldiers who were guarding the cannon. The soldiers immediately untied the ropes that were holding the cannon. Big Bear commanded 2 ogres to come forward and carry the super light howitzer to the ground. Looking at the fully armed ogres, these city lords were filled with envy and jealousy. They had long discovered these shockingly large monsters and were shocked by their might. They also had a preliminary understanding of the wealth of Holy Dragon City. The resources required to nurture such ogres were not something that ordinary people could afford. Since the appearance of the Holy Dragon City army, the strongest impression they gave people was that they were rich. Whether it was the huge war chariot, the excellent equipment, or the daily food and lodging, they all showed the style of a local tyrant. Regarding the Holy Dragon City's way of doing things, the 4 castellans, other than showing disdain on the surface, were actually very envious in their hearts. Unfortunately, they could only watch the Holy Dragon City's way of doing things and could not learn it. Otherwise, their towers would go bankrupt in less than 2 days. Just as these city lords were sighing in their hearts, the Holy Dragon City's warriors had already leveled the field and brought in cannonballs. After the 100 Flower Valley city lord saw the artillery shells in the box, a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. She looked at Tangjin with a scrutinizing gaze, and no one knew what she was planning in her heart. The commotion in the Holy Dragon City's camp had long attracted the attention of the other soldiers. They all gathered nearby in unison and watched with widened eyes. As for the use of the light howitzer on the military transport vehicles, they had all sorts of guesses. The Holy Dragon City's soldiers skillfully operated the cannon while Tangjin began to look around. After taking a few glances, Tangjin pointed at the Black Rock City in the distance and said to the 4 city lords, "That's the direction of Black Rock City. There are zombie monsters outside, so we'll use them as an experiment." As soon as Tangjin's voice fell, he began to switch the map perspective. Then, relying on the upgraded, super shooting assistant, he locked onto the position of the outermost zombie monsters in Blackstone City and fired the cannonball. Boom! The sudden loud noise startled all the onlookers, and the whole camp became a mess. Fortunately, the chaos quickly subsided. The 4 castellans stared at the place where Tangjin was pointing with their eyes wide open. Soon, they discovered that a loud noise had also been heard from the group of zombie monsters that surrounded Black Rock City. After that, countless corpses of the corpse monsters were thrown into the sky. The area that was originally densely packed with corpse monsters was immediately cleared out. Hiss, 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 what an overbearing weapon! The 4 city lords had extremely good eyesight, and now that they were looking down from above, they could clearly see the entire process of the bombardment. It was precisely because of this that they were even more clear about the power of the super light howitzer. Looking at the terrifying scene after being bombarded, they felt a chill run down their backs. If Tang Jin were to fire a shot at their position, the consequences would be unimaginable. After witnessing the might of the super light howitzer, their gazes when they looked at Tang Jin were mixed with a trace of vigilance. The more they knew about the Holy Dragon City, the more uneasy they felt. Compared to the Holy Dragon City, whether it was in terms of weapons, equipment, or logistics, they seemed to be inferior to their boss. One in fresh clothes and the other in tattered clothes. The contrast was so obvious when they stood together. Tang Jin's shot had shocked the four Castellans. They no longer had any doubts about Holy Dragon City's strength. At this moment, the colossal Bone City's city lord was in a dilemma. Tang Jin's display of his strength had already caused him to feel a heavy psychological pressure. His original plan of controlling the 5-city alliance's army had to be changed at the last minute. It was destined that one would not be able to obtain any benefits by going against a brash and powerful person like Tang Jin. Moreover, this fellow was an extremely unstable factor and was very likely to affect his plans. Although he wanted nothing more than to destroy Holy Dragon City, he could only think about it. Other than the city lord of Colossal Bone City, the other 3 city lords also had different expressions. They all had their own thoughts about the martial power displayed by the Holy Dragon City. Tang Jin took in everyone's expression and secretly thought that he had successfully acted tough. Only then did he slowly walk in front of the 4 city lords and softly laughed, "City lords, how powerful is my secret weapon?" Full 0W current novels on n/o/v/3l/b in.co/m. Holy Dragon City's army is strong and powerful. In that case, I'll have to trouble Holy Dragon City Master to attack the Corpse Clan City. The giant Bone City's mayor complimented him with a fake smile, then once again expressed his attitude that he would never send troops to attack the Undead Clan City. The Lord of Redwater City and the Lord of Earth Valley City had previously advanced and retreated together. Although they had seen the power of the Holy Dragon City's cannons, they still did not dare to face the Lord Tier Spirit Brain Corpse King. They were small and could not afford to suffer too big of a loss. The 100 Flower Valley's city lord mused for a moment before cupping his hands towards Tang Jin and saying, "Since the Holy Dragon City Master is so confident, then this little sister will accompany you to explore this dragon's pool and tiger's den." Tang Jin didn't expect that this woman would actually dare to follow him to attack the Corpse Race's city. He looked deeply at the 100 Flower Valley's city master and cupped his hands. No, I'll still need the help of the city master of 100 Flower Valley. Since the 5 towers had already chosen their respective targets, it was time for them to split up and discuss. The 3 city masters turned around and left, leaving the 100 Flower Valley city master alone. Tang Jin looked at the tent not far away and walked in with the 100 Flower Valley's city lord. The Holy Dragon City soldier brought a cup of tea and placed it on the table. After Tang Jin and the 100 Flower Valley city lord sat down together, he extended his hand and indicated for the other party to drink. The city lord of Centauria Valley nodded slightly and picked up the teacup. Her movements were extremely elegant. Tang Jin took a glance and felt a slight difference in his heart. This was because the tea-drinking posture of the 100 Flower Valley's city lord was quite similar to the tea-drinking technique of his original world. After putting down the teacups, the 2 of them began to discuss how to attack the Corpse Clan City. According to Tang Jin's plan, they would first use the super light howitzer to bombard the surroundings of the Undead Clan's building for a long time. Then, the soldiers from both sides would approach the Undead Clan's building and attack with firearms. The main show was coming up next. Tang Jin would lead the cultivator battle team to attack the interior of the Corpse Race's city to find its foundation and find a way to take it away. Tang Jin also had a strategy to deal with the Spirit Brain Corpse King. After the two sides came to an agreement, they decided to set off the next morning and set up camp at a place about 3 kilometers away from the Corpse Clan's building. Then, they started to bombard the building. After the 100 Flower Valley City Lord left, Tang Jin lifted his teacup and took a light sip. His brows furrowed once again. He felt that he couldn't see through this woman. There was something wrong with this woman. Her background was definitely not simple. She spoke and acted very cultured. Although she appeared valiant and heroic, her living habits from the past showed that she was very different from ordinary wanderers. When Tang Jin showed the super light howitzer, this woman's gaze was very strange. When the two of them were talking just now, she had asked Tang Jin about the number of shells he was carrying and the average lethality parameters of the howitzer. An ordinary city lord in the world of Luqing would definitely not be able to ask such a question. When Imo Ran and Tang Jin were talking, they had mentioned the city lord of the 100 Flower Valley. They said that her origin was very mysterious. Even the outside world knew very little about the tower city of the 100 Flower Valley that she had built. Through today's contact, Tang Jin believed that this woman definitely had a great background. Perhaps she came from an organization with a long history or a powerful city. In such a place, she had the opportunity to receive etiquette training and also the opportunity to come into contact with all kinds of strange things, including weapons such as howitzer. The world of Luqing was too mysterious, and all kinds of strange things could appear in this world. It was not a big deal that the city lord of 100 Flower Valley had seen a howitzer. The key question was how many of these weapons the force behind her had. The weapons that came from his original world were the most powerful guarantee for Tang Jin to conquer the world. Before new weapons and energy were invented, he must guarantee that he would have exclusive possession of them. If this 100 Flower Valley city lord also had a similar hot weapon in his hands, then Tang Jin would have no choice but to ruthlessly destroy the flower and directly wipe out this 100 Flower Valley city tower to avoid any future trouble. However, from the looks of the 100 Flower Valley soldiers' equipment, perhaps Tang Jin was overthinking. According to the Cornerstone Platform's trading price, weapons like automatic rifles could easily cost thousands of brain matter. Other than Tang Jin, who had the ability to cross planes, other forces could not afford to equip such weapons. Perhaps the Centauria Valley City Master had only seen a similar weapon, but he did not have the strength to equip it on a large scale. At most, he had 1 or 2 weapons that he kept hidden and used as secret weapons. After Tang Jin thought for a while, he no longer thought about this problem. Instead, he took out a book and slowly read it. Night slowly fell, and the entire camp was filled with burning bonfires, dyeing the night sky crimson. Due to the undead race's rampage, almost all the monsters nearby had been killed and turned into a member of the undead. It was also for this reason that the surroundings of the Wanderer Fair were extremely quiet and no monsters came to harass them. Tang Jin put down the book in his hand. After he went out to patrol, he laid on the bed and fell into a deep sleep. Early the next morning, after the Holy Dragon City soldiers had their breakfast, they set out to camp and prepared to set off for the Corpse Clan city. The warriors of Centauria Valley's towers were also ready. After regrouping with the Holy Dragon City's carriages, both parties slowly left the Wanderer Market under the watchful eyes of the warriors of the other 3 towers. Tang Jin sat in a military jeep as he sized up the 100 Flower Valley's Lu City soldiers that were slowly advancing not far away. Most of them were wearing a strange kind of wrought-tan armor, which was dark in color. Their weapons were slender sabers, which looked quite delicate. Perhaps it was because they had a female castellan, which caused the warrior equipment in 100 Flower Valley to reveal a trace of fine and soft beauty. The vehicle they were using was a strange-looking beast that looked like a combination of rhinoceros and ants. Each horn was more than half a meter long, and there were more than 50 of them in total. They were used to carry supplies. The city master of 100 Flower Valley was riding a war horse, surrounded by 10 female cultivators. She was particularly eye-catching among a group of men. Tang Jin looked for a while before retracting his gaze. Through the map view, he could already see the city of the undead race. Tang Jin didn't get too close to the Corpse Clan city. Instead, he advanced to a suitable distance before stopping. As the convoy stopped, the warriors of the Holy Dragon City immediately jumped off the chariots and began to set up a defensive position to defend against the zombie monsters that tried to rush over and stop the bombardment. Nearly 100 mines were placed in front of the defensive position. Due to the characteristics of the undead race, these mines did not need to be buried and could be placed directly on the ground. The Centauria Valley warriors who had followed the Holy Dragon City soldiers here were dazzled by their swift movements and all kinds of weapons and equipment. From time to time, they would exchange a few words with their companions and guess the use of the weapons and equipment. 100 Flower Valley's city master was watching intently. As more and more weapons appeared, the surprise on her face gradually deepened, and the smile on the corner of her mouth became more and more obvious. After the temporary position was set up, the super light howitzer was also ready. Tang Jin stepped forward and adjusted the coordinates before starting to fire. The deafening sounds of the cannons continued to ring out, forcing the Holy Dragon City warriors to plug their ears and open their mouths to prevent their eardrums from being damaged. The wild beasts that were used to carry supplies in 100 Flower Valley were so scared that their legs were shaking, and they kept letting out low growls. If not for the soldiers of the tower, they would have fled in all directions. As soon as this terrifying weapon of war showed its might, it caused a huge number of casualties to the corpse race. Through the map view, Tang Jin could clearly see countless zombie monsters and undead clan being hit by the cannonballs. Then, under the violent shock waves, they were torn into countless pieces of charred meat. Broken armor and clothing flew in the air, leaving these remains without a single piece of clothing. A corpse monster centurion looked at the sky blankly. With its remaining thoughts, it still could not figure out where the cannonballs that fell from the sky came from, let alone lie down and dodge them. As the cannonball hit the ground, countless gravel also dodged. They mixed with the shrapnel of the cannonball and instantly swept across the surrounding tens of meters, shattering countless zombies. A group of Saber Shield Ghost soldiers tried to use their shields to block the flying gravel, but their shields were smashed to pieces. The Saber Shield Ghost soldiers hiding behind them were also shot with bloody holes and fell limply to the ground. Although he wasn't dead, he was half crippled. With Tang Jin's map perspective as a support, every time the Holy Dragon City fired, it would bring great damage to the undead. The more undead gathered, the cannonball would land in that place, setting off a wave of blood and flesh. Not long after, the surroundings of the Corpse Clan city were filled with wreckage and smoke. The constant cannon sounds had already caused the corpse race to be in complete chaos. Unlike the undead monsters that only had the desire to kill and devour, the undead creatures had simple thoughts, and the continuous bombardment had already made them feel fear. As they dodged, they sent out a kind of corpse bird that was about half a meter long and began to circle around the city of the Corpse Clan, trying to find the enemy to attack. Tang Jin wasn't far away from the undead clan city, so he was quickly discovered by the scouting undead bird. The bird then reported his location to a Corpse Clan centurion. The corpse race centurion glared at the Holy Dragon City's army and then ran into the strange-looking corpse race tower. In less than 2 minutes, Tang Jin saw a large group of corpse race heavy cavalry rushing out of the tower. Tang Jin did not dare to be careless in the face of such a powerful undead army. He immediately ordered the machine guns and mortar cannoneers to get ready. At the same time, he ordered all the Holy Dragon City soldiers to immediately switch to using steel core armor-piercing bullets. Seeing this, the Lord of Centauria Valley also ordered his warriors to prepare their bows and javelins, getting ready for battle. The Centauria Valley Castellan knew very well that compared to the Holy Dragon City's weapons and equipment, his subordinates' cold weapons were of little use. However, he still had to at least show his attitude. As the corpse race's heavy cavalry moved out, the ground immediately shook. Looking from afar, a black mass of heavy armored cavalry was like a raging wave, rapidly pouncing toward the Holy Dragon City's formation. Due to the characteristics of the undead race, the undead cavalrymen could start charging from a very long distance without having to worry about whether the war horses under them could withstand such a long-distance charge. Smoke and dust filled the sky as the corpse race's heavy cavalry arrived in an instant. Tang Jin could even see the blood-red eyes of the corpse race's heavy cavalrymen under their helmets. These tall cavalrymen were extremely skilled in driving their war horses. They waved their war blades and spears, and their killing intent soared into the sky. Such a scene would cause one to have a sorrowful thought of being undefeatable. If a timid person had encountered such a scene, they would have probably been scared witless and turned around to escape. However, the Holy Dragon City's soldiers had already been baptized in many big scenes. Compared to the anxious Hundred Flower Valley's soldiers, the Holy Dragon City's camp was as stable as a rock. Fire! Fire! Tai Sing roared, and the machine guns and mortars shot out flames at the same time. The metal barrage instantly collided with the armored cavalry formed by the corpse race's heavy cavalry. The armor worn by the corpse race's heavy cavalry could perfectly resist the attack of swords and arrows, but in front of the firearms in the original world, it was still extremely fragile. The whistling bullets made countless round holes in the armor of the corpse race's heavy cavalrymen. After the bullets rolled a few times in their bodies, they rushed out of their bodies, deformed the armor behind them, and shattered it. The continuous bullets shot into the bodies of the corpse race's heavy cavalrymen, turning the bodies under the armor into a mess. Minced meat and blood seeped out from the gaps of the broken armor and fell on the war horses. The dense barrage of bullets not only turned the undead cavalrymen into mincemeat, but also the war horses they were riding on. The bullets either bit off a large piece of their muscles, peeled off a large piece of their skin, or pierced through their stomachs, dragging their internal organs far away. The numbing sensation of the undead race towards pain caused these war horses to persist and run far away even though they were covered in injuries. Only then did they unwillingly fall to the ground. The mines on the ground exploded one after another. Unfortunately, they didn't cause much damage to the corpse race's heavy cavalry, but they successfully slowed down their speed. The appearance of machine guns and cannons caused the cavalry forces in the original world to withdraw from the stage of history. In the Lucheng world, Tang Jin's machine guns and mortars were still the fatal nemesis of the undead heavy cavalry. It was only a short distance of a few dozen meters, but the corpse race's heavy cavalry had paid a heavy price. The ground was covered in countless corpses. However, such a terrifying massacre didn't scare the remaining undead heavy cavalry. They still stepped on the corpses of their comrades and continued to charge towards the enemy. This was the rule of the heavy armored cavalrymen. They would never stop charging until they broke through the enemy's formation, even if they died in the process. They were like sharp arrows that were shot at the brazier. They would either knock over the brazier or be caught in the brazier and set ablaze. There was no second path to choose. The Holy Dragon City's soldiers armed with automatic rifles also joined the attack at this moment. The sound of gunfire filled the entire space in an instant. With their participation, the remaining corpse race's heavy cavalrymen found it even more difficult to move. They were like bamboo rafts in the middle of a stormy sea, constantly being broken apart before finally falling to the ground, their flesh and blood mixing together with the soil. When the gunshots stopped, the Holy Dragon City's soldiers quickly put away their guns and stood up. They began to inspect their firearms and replenish their ammunition. They had calm expressions on their faces, as if the terrifying corpse race heavy cavalry that they had just killed were just some random monsters in the wilderness. The Hundred Flower Valley's soldiers did not join in the fight. With the Holy Dragon City's terrifying firepower, they could only watch the show. Get the latest chapters on n/velbin.com. Although they didn't participate in the battle, as the most direct witnesses of this battle, the deep shock and horror in their hearts couldn't be dispelled for a long time. The fierce battle had just ended, and Holy Dragon City's soldiers began to clean up the battlefield. Although this wave of attack by the Corpse Clan's heavy cavalry failed, there would inevitably be the next wave of attack. Tang Jin wanted to continuously tear the Corpse Clan monsters apart and eat them up bit by bit. They used cannons to bombard the undead while luring them out to destroy them. No matter how many soldiers the undead race had, they couldn't afford such a consumption. Seeing the Holy Dragon City soldiers pocketing the brains one by one, the Lucheng soldiers of Centauria Valley were extremely envious. These brains were not the cheapy level 1 or level 2 brains. Each of them could be compared to 100. It was a pity that in the battle just now, they had been playing the role of a bystander. No matter how thick-skinned they were too embarrassed to go up and take a share. When the next wave of zombie monsters attack, we must do our best to perform. We must not let those guys from Holy Dragon City look down on us. Many Lucheng warriors of Blossom Valley swore in their hearts. They really couldn't stand watching the soldiers of other sects kill their enemies without being able to intervene. It hurt their self-esteem. However, when the second wave of undead monsters came, the Lucheng warriors of Blossom Valley lost their confidence. Looking from the camp, nearly 200 Corpse Clan Centurions were charging toward them. Around these Corpse Race's Centurions, there were all sorts of strange corpse monsters. They were like a black wave that was rapidly sweeping over, and their foul smell drifted 10 miles away with the wind. The Lucheng warriors of Blossom Valley had never seen such a scene before, and they couldn't help but feel nervous. After all, these were not small cats or dogs, but real monsters. Even the weakest of them had the strength of a level 2 monster. For the warriors of the Tower City, a battle with dozens of monsters could be considered a big battle. What would a battle with thousands of monsters be? FIDDEU UPTS on NOV/E/LN.com. However, when the panicking 100 Flower Valley soldiers turned to look in the direction of the Holy Dragon City, all they saw were determined faces. There was no panic within the camp. The 100 Flower Valley's warriors, who had originally felt disdain for the Holy Dragon City's ability to kill monsters with their superior weapons, could not help but put away their contempt. Just based on this fearless attitude in the face of danger, the Holy Dragon City was definitely not simple. However, they did not know that the Holy Dragon City had encountered monsters that were more than 10 times the size of the ones in front of them. The soldiers' nerves had long been tempered to be extremely tough. As the monsters continued to approach, the machine guns and mortars finally opened fire, and the zombie monsters at the front were knocked down in an instant. The zombie monsters behind stepped on their comrades' bodies, ignoring the bullets flying towards them and the cannonballs falling from above, and firmly pounced towards the defensive position. The Corpse Clan Centurion hid in the middle of these corpse monsters, constantly dodging the bullets and mortar attacks. Other than a few unlucky ones who were accidentally killed, the remaining corpse monster Centurions were basically safe and sound. As long as they weren't continuously shot by machine guns, and occasionally hit by a few bullets, their movements would still not be affected. More than a dozen Holy Dragon City soldiers with anti-material firearms lay on the top of the chariots and began to lock onto the Corpse Centurions. Every time a gunshot rang out, the Corpse Centurions who were being attacked would be enraged beyond words. Unlike the machine gun strafing, this kind of accurate shooting caused greater damage. The snipers of the Holy Dragon City locked onto the vital points of the Corpse Centurions. From time to time, a Corpse Centurion's head would be blown up, and his huge body would crash to the ground. By the time the zombie monsters entered the range of the rifles, nearly half of the zombie Centurions had lost their combat power. The guns and weapons from the original world were used to perfection by the natives of the building world. Each of them was comparable to a sharpshooter, and the corpse monsters were in great pain. At a distance of about 300 meters, the zombie monsters did not have such a level of long-range attack. This also meant that the Holy Dragon City soldiers did not have to worry about the problem of defense. They only kept pouring bullets at the zombie monsters. When the undead were less than 200 meters away, the undead archers who had been hiding at the back began to shoot. A large number of black arrows came from afar, and a few landed on the ground from time to time. After the Holy Dragon City soldiers in charge of operating the mortars saw this, they immediately locked onto the position of the undead archers and began to bombard them. The explosion blasted the undead archers into pieces, and they could no longer attack effectively. When the zombie monsters were less than 100 meters away from the camp, the Luqing warriors of Blossom Valley finally had the opportunity to attack. They used a kind of battle bow made of ancient vines and kept shooting, killing many zombie monsters. However, shooting at this speed was very physically exhausting. The Luqing warriors of Blossom Valley only shot 10 arrows before they felt their arms swelling and powerless, unable to pull the bowstring. At this moment, they were even more envious of the Holy Dragon City's warriors. Compared to bows and arrows, the advantage of firearms in continuous attacks was too obvious. When the zombie monsters were less than 50 meters away from the position, their numbers had been reduced to a terrifying extent, but it was also at this moment that the battle entered a state of white heat. Whether it was the Holy Dragon City or Centauria Valley, both sides were attacking with all their might, trying to stop the corpse monsters that were charging forward again under the urging of the Corpse Clan Centurion. 30 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters. The Holy Dragon City soldiers threw away the last wave of grenades. Following Tai Sang's order, all the Holy Dragon City soldiers put down their rifles, picked up a special shield from the ground, and pulled out the fine steel battle swords at their waists, starting a melee battle with the few remaining corpse monsters. The Holy Dragon City's cultivator team was like a storm. They had already trapped a few corpse monster centurions at the first moment and were constantly attacking. Big Bear waved his mace and led his ogres into the battlefield. No monster could stop this team. Whether it was the corpse monster or the corpse centurion, they were all smashed into meat paste by the ogre's giant mace. As the two armies clashed, Holy Dragon City's performance once again stunned Hundred Flower Valley. Looking at the Holy Dragon City's soldiers killing the corpse monsters one-sidedly, they suddenly felt a sense of helplessness. These soldiers, who could be said to be elite in both close and long-range combat, were a nightmare that no enemy wanted to face. As an ally of this group of people, Blossom Valley felt great pressure. He turned to look at the battlefield. The battle was coming to an end. And NBSP, Tai Sang's daily training was showing its effect at this moment. Facing the slightly slow zombie monsters, the Holy Dragon City warriors with metal shields and steel machetes were more than capable. They cooperated with each other and killed the zombie monsters one by one. Occasionally, when the Holy Dragon City soldiers were in danger, the members of the cultivator battle team would step forward to help. Tang Jin would also help from time to time, allowing the Holy Dragon City's soldiers to remain in a state of shock but not danger. The Luqing warriors of Blossom Valley were not to be outdone, and they also surrounded a wave of zombies and attacked. Compared to the Holy Dragon City, they were far inferior in terms of equipment and training, so there were casualties very quickly. The Holy Dragon City's medical personnel appeared in time to help them treat their wounds, which made the injured extremely grateful. However, they did not know that these first aid personnel were all newbies. They had a stomach full of common sense, but had no chance to practice at all. This time, the Luqing warriors of Blossom Valley were injured, and they finally had a chance to apply what they had learned. As for what the Hundred Flower Valley soldiers, who were treated as lab rats, would think, that was not within the Holy Dragon City military doctor's consideration. I've worked so hard to save your life. Did I save the wrong person? Luqing's warriors from Blossom Valley were lying on stretchers, screaming in pain as they were beaten by the two-handed military doctor from Holy Dragon City. The corner of Tang Jin's mouth twitched when he saw this. The Holy Dragon City's soldier beside him also had a gloating expression. Ever since the last four-legged flying dragon attack, the Holy Dragon City's soldiers had a deep understanding of these two-handed military doctors. At that time, a Holy Dragon City soldier with an injury to his abdomen had been wrapped up like a mummy, unable to even turn over. The Holy Dragon City soldier who was helping to carry the injured man laughed all the way, making the injured Lu Qing soldier feel so ashamed that he wanted to die. After the Holy Dragon City's soldiers were injured, they did not dare to rashly trouble this group of people. Fortunately, after this battle, the ones injured were the Lu Qing soldiers of Blossom Valley. Otherwise, the Holy Dragon soldiers would have to face the inhumane torture of these military doctors again. After the battle, it was time to clean up the battlefield. This time, Centauria Valley finally had the right to clean up the battlefield. However, compared to Holy Dragon City's harvest, the number of brain pearls they obtained was not worth mentioning. They were not even a fraction of Holy Dragon City's. 100 Flower Valley's city lord walked in front of Tangshan and said with an envious tone, "Holy Dragon City is indeed extraordinary. I believe that it won't be long before your Holy Dragon City levels up again, right?" Tangshan nodded. There was no need to hide this kind of matter. He might as well admit it openly. Centauria Valley's castellan sighed at these words. Looking at the well-equipped Holy Dragon warriors, she couldn't help but say with a hint of jealousy, "Holy Dragon City Master is really lucky to have so many powerful weapons. In this area, I'm afraid no force can stop your rise." Tangshan glanced at the 100 Flower Valley's city master and said in a deep voice, "You're wrong. The endless wilderness is so vast. This area is too small. It can't stop the Holy Dragon City from advancing." Follow US stories at nvl/by/n.com. The Lord of 100 Flowers City chuckled and looked at Tangshan. "The Holy Dragon City Lord is so ambitious. I really want to know, after destroying the Corpse Race's city, is the Holy Dragon City planning to expand the results of the battle and wipe out all of us small cities?" A cold glint flashed across Tangshan's eyes as he asked, "What do you think?" The city master of Centauria Valley shook her head gently. She looked at the distant sky and said with a heavy tone, "Your Holy Dragon City is so powerful, so upgrading and expanding your territory is inevitable. However, if you do so, the first to suffer will be the human race. The Holy Dragon City's army is strong, but do you know what the human race is currently facing? It's no exaggeration to say that they're not far from being exterminated." When the 100 Flower Valley's city lord said this, he took a deep look at Tangshan and continued, "The endless wilderness is indeed vast and boundless, but it's rare to see a scene similar to the one we're in. Most of the regions were controlled by the alien races. In those places, the human race didn't have any living space. On the contrary, in this area, although monsters are rampant, the humans have a chance to survive. This is a tragedy." Tangshan was silent as he listened for a moment before he suddenly asked, "I heard that there are buildings built by the human race thousands of miles away. Is that true?" 100 Flower Valley's city lord looked at Tangshan in astonishment. After a long while, he finally smiled. "The Holy Dragon City Master is indeed shrewd. It seems that you've already begun to doubt my origins? You're right, there's indeed a level 9 city built by the human race 10,000 miles away. This city is called Zhan Tian, and it has been passed down for 10,000 years. The first patriarch named it Zhan Tian to remind his descendants that only by fighting against the heavens and earth could the human race survive under the coveting eyes of countless alien races. However, did the city lord know that the Heaven Battling Tower was still surrounded by strong enemies? On the land around it, there were a total of 5 foreign races that were eyeing it covetously. If it weren't for the fact that over the course of countless years, the human race's ancestors have been constantly advancing, the Heaven Battling Tower would have been destroyed by the outsiders, and the tens of millions of humans living in the tower would have long been reduced to bones. After Tangjin heard this, he asked the 100-Flower Valley City Lord, "Since you know so much about the things that are thousands of miles away, you must be from that place. However, I have 2 questions that I would like to ask. I hope you can enlighten me? Holy Dragon City Master, please speak. As long as it's something I know, I will definitely tell you." Tangjin nodded his head in thanks. After which, he asked, "From what I know, once monsters reach the Lord tier, their numbers will become scarce. I wonder how the Heaven Battling Tower obtains such a huge amount of high-level brain matter? Does the Heaven Battling Tower also have such weapons, and how many of them do we have?" After Tangjin finished asking, he looked at the 100-Flower Valley City Master without blinking, waiting for her answer. "The 2 questions you've asked aren't secrets, and I happen to know them very well. I can tell you the answers, but does the Holy Dragon City Lord not have any reaction?" When the City Lord of Centauria Valley said this, he glanced at Tangjin with a smile in his eyes. Tangjin shook his head and softly said, "Even if you don't tell me, I will know the answer sooner or later. If you want to use this matter to exchange for benefits, I advise you to give up as soon as possible." And NBSP. The City Lord rolled her eyes and mumbled, "Cheapskate." Then, she said unwillingly, "The mysteries of this world are far beyond your imagination. Before you reach that level, you will never believe that these laws exist. When the tower advanced to level 5, it would be able to cross planes and connect to an unknown world. It would be filled with all kinds of terrifying high-level monsters, and level 6 Lord monsters could be found everywhere. Any building that had reached level 5 in a certain area would be qualified to enter this world and fight for the brains of the Lord tier monsters. When one of the turreted cities was successfully upgraded to level 6, the other competitors would head to the newly built turreted city through the spatial tunnel and attack the new turreted city in place of the monsters attacking the city. This was a brutal battle that would only end when one side was completely defeated. If the defending side wins, they can obtain all the inheritance of the attacking side and become rich overnight. After the attacking side wins, the newly upgraded level 6 city can be divided. After that, the space channel will be closed and we will wait for new level 5 towers to join us. Then, we will start collecting the brain pearls and start a new round of competition." Tangjin was dumbfounded. He didn't expect that such a magical thing would happen when Lu Qing advanced to rank 6. If he didn't listen to the explanation of the 100-Flower Valley City Master today, Tangjin would have to wait for Lu Qing to advance to level 5. When the space channel appeared, he would probably have to fumble around and might have suffered a big loss. This favor wasn't small and Tangjin couldn't not return it. When the 100-Flower Valley City Lord saw Tangjin's pensive expression, she chuckled and continued, "You asked me if Heaven Battling City has this kind of weapon you use, and I can clearly tell you that Heaven Battling City does. However, there was a limited number of such weapons. They were basically from some wild buildings and could not be used as mainstream weapons. In addition to this weapon, there are also many strange weapons that you have never heard of in Heaven Battling City. They are either from the 100 tribes in the wilderness or from various wild buildings, and their power also varies. The wonders of this world are far beyond your imagination." Tangjin was speechless for a long time. The 100-Flower Valley City Lord's words had allowed him to have a better understanding of this strange world. After thinking for a while, Tangjin asked again, "Heaven Battling City is tens of thousands of miles away, so why have you appeared here?" When the 100-Flower Valley City Lord heard this, a solemn expression appeared on her face as she said to Tangjin, "Do you know that the human race is weak, but how can we stand tall in the predicament of being surrounded by powerful enemies? That's because there's always a belief in the hearts of our human race. This faith is called hope. As long as it exists, our human race will not be completely exterminated. It was because of this belief that Heaven Battling City had stood tall for 10,000 years, and it was also because of this belief that although the human race had been wandering around, they had still been able to survive like weeds. The reason I'm here is to find and sow the seeds of hope. This is my mission and my lifelong pursuit. Even if my bones are crushed, I will still have no regrets. Tang Jin's expression turned serious when he heard this. He suddenly felt a faint admiration for the 100-Flower Valley City Lord. This woman came to this barren land from thousands of miles away. During this time, she encountered countless dangers. However, she still stubbornly built the city of 100-Flower Valley, trying to build a place for the human race to live from thousands of miles away. Hope was like a seed. After it was spread, there would always be 1 or 2 seeds that would sprout and bloom. Even if the place was barren and desolate, it would still bloom into the most beautiful flower. Tang Jin mused for a moment before slowly opening his mouth. To tell you the truth, I admire your faith and determination. I believe that Heaven Battling City must have scattered countless seeds just like you, looking forward to the day when they will blossom everywhere. Once we succeed, Heaven Battling City's strength will greatly increase, and it will become another trump card against the foreign races. After he said this, Tang Jin's expression suddenly turned cold. He looked at the 100-Flower Valley City Lord and continued, however, in this region, only my Holy Dragon City is the human race's only hope. Only Holy Dragon City is the only ruler. I'll remind you, if Heaven Battling City dares to extend its claws, you'll have to be prepared to be cut off. Tang Jin swept a glance at the gloomy expression of the 100-Flower Valley City Master before continuing, the reason why I'm being so blunt is that I don't want us to fight each other. Compared to Holy Dragon City, your 100-Flower Valley is vulnerable. I respect your beliefs and understand your efforts. That's why I said this. Please think twice. These words were truly from the bottom of Tang Jin's heart. It was fine if the other party took it to heart. Otherwise, he wouldn't mind using a thunderous method. The 100-Flower Valley City Lord was silent for a moment. Then, he looked at Tang Jin with an expressionless face and said in an icy cold tone, the Holy Dragon City Lord is right. My 100-Flower Valley Lu Qing is indeed not your Holy Dragon City's opponent, but the strength of Heaven Battling City is far beyond your imagination. Your Holy Dragon City is only a second-grade city. It's obviously not a wise move to go against such a powerful 9th-grade city. Perhaps you can also join my Heaven Battling City, wouldn't that be better? Tang Jin slightly shook his head as he looked at the 100-Flower Valley City Lord, who had a look of anticipation on her face. He had never thought of depending on someone else. No matter how powerful the Heaven Battling Tower was, it had nothing to do with him. The 100-Flower Valley City Lord's expression darkened as he looked at the determined Tang Jin. Clearly, he had already expected this outcome. Check new CHDers at novilbin.com. Although they had only interacted for a short period of time, the 100-Flower Valley City Lord was very certain that Tang Jin was the kind of fierce and ambitious person who would not be willing to be under others. In order to achieve his goal, this guy would definitely do what he said. She had gone through a lot of hardships to build the city of 100-Flower Valley, and she was not willing to be destroyed like this. However, Tang Jin had already given her a notice. The 100-Flower Valley City Lord knew that this was definitely not a joke. Therefore, she had to make a choice. The City Lord of Centauria Valley could not just watch as the residents of his tower were slaughtered. The remaining options were either to be annexed by the Holy Dragon City or to take his residence far away from home. As for what to choose, the 100-Flower Valley City Master was in a dilemma. Tang Jin didn't pay attention to the 100-Flower Valley City Lord, who was deep in thought. He walked in front of the light howitzer and readjusted the coordinates. After firing a few more times, he ordered them to stop. The surroundings of the Corpse Clan city were now filled with bullet holes, and the corpses of the corpse monsters were scattered everywhere. Many monsters with missing limbs were crawling on the ground. They had been completely destroyed by the continuous artillery fire and no longer had any attack power. The large group of corpse monsters that were originally guarding the Corpse Clan's Tower City were now only left with a sparse few, and they were wandering around in a daze. The Holy Dragon City's convoys slowly approached. The Nouveau Riche captain at the front fired a shot, turning the remaining corpse monsters into pieces. Tai Sing, Qianlong, you guys bring the cultivator team and follow me in. Big Bear will lead the ogres in as well. This corpse race city is very strange, so everyone must be careful after entering. After Tang Jin gave the order, he glanced at the 100 Flower Valley city master and led his subordinates straight to the Corpse Clan city. The city lord of Centauria Valley hesitated for a moment, but in the end, she still led the cultivator battle team of Centauria Valley into the city of the corpse race. At the gate of the Corpse Clan's tower, 2 clusters of blood-red giant vine-like creatures were constantly swaying. Their vines were full of black inverted thorns, shining coldly under the sun, completely sealing off the entrance to the tower. Tang Jin already had a way to deal with this kind of monster. After a dozen simple Molotov cocktails were thrown, the 2 clusters of strange vines were immediately enveloped in flames and emitted sharp cries at the same time. At the same time, several cultivators began to shoot with machine guns, shattering the burning vines. The broken parts of the vines were constantly spraying out stinky red liquid, which made people want to vomit. 10 minutes later, these 2 clusters of vines completely stopped struggling. Only then did Tang Jin take the lead and step into the Corpse Clan city. However, Tang Jin's expression changed slightly the moment he entered the city. Tang Jin clearly remembered the structure of the hall on the first floor of the Corpse Clan's tower. However, the hall had long been changed beyond recognition and was filled with a strange aura. Looking up, all the walls and stone pillars were wrapped in a sticky substance that constantly squirmed like flesh and blood, looking extremely disgusting. From time to time, large balls of mucus would drip from his head. When he looked up, the ceiling was also covered by this disgusting thing. Tang Jin carried a large alloy sword and walked to the front of the stone pillar. He slashed at the fat-like substance. A stream of black blood seeped out from the inside. The place where Tang Jin had slashed it also began to heal rapidly. After pondering for a while, Tang Jin ordered the members of the cultivator battle team to bury the explosives while he slowly walked toward the interior of the building. Tai Sing and Qianlong exchanged glances and followed closely behind. After Tang Jin walked for a distance, he sighed in a low voice, "If I'm not wrong, this Corpse Clan's Lu Qing is a living monster, and we're in its stomach now." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The 100 Flower Valley's city lord even hurriedly asked Tang Jin how he knew about this. Tang Jin merely shook his head slightly. He would naturally not tell everyone that this was the result of the digitized all-round combat interface S detection. Originally, Tang Jin's plan was to first bomb the city of the corpse race and destroy it, then force the Spirit Brain Corpse King to come out and fight. However, when he saw the super-strong healing power of the fat, he knew that the explosives might work, but they definitely wouldn't be able to destroy the building. He had to find the vital parts of this fat monster and kill it. Only then could he find the foundation stone and completely destroy the Corpse Clan city. As for where the Spirit Brain Corpse King was in the tower, Tang Jin already had a faint guess in his heart. Pa da! A soft sound was heard. Tang Jin turned around and saw a basketball-sized meatball falling from the ceiling. He looked up at the ceiling and was surprised to find that there were countless small holes on the fat material outside the ceiling. As it wriggled, more and more meatballs were squeezed out. Tang Jin's eyes narrowed as he looked at the meatballs that continued to fall. He swung his sword and split apart a meatball beside him. Pfft! A wave of foul-smelling fresh blood spurted out. At the same time, half of a savage-looking monster rolled onto the ground. Its 2 red eyes were still glaring at Tang Jin. "Everyone, pay attention." Immediately chop these meatballs into pieces. Tang Jin's order had just been issued when the meatballs instantly exploded. Countless malevolent-looking little corpse ghosts swarmed out and ruthlessly pounced towards everyone. These little ghouls were like demons. Their human-shaped bodies were very small, but their movements were extremely fast. After they jumped out of the meatball, they dragged their long tails and scurried around like rats, attacking the cultivators. Taking advantage of their small size, a few little ghouls sneaked between the legs of a Holy Dragon City cultivator, then waved their sharp claws and climbed up the cultivator's clothes and armor. The cultivator from the Holy Dragon City had not realized that a little corpse ghost had climbed onto his body. At this moment, he was constantly brandishing his battle saber, cutting the few little corpse ghosts in front of him into pieces. When these little ghouls climbed onto the Holy Dragon City cultivator's neck, they immediately opened their mouths full of fangs and bit down on the cultivator. Bang, bang, bang! 3 consecutive gunshots were heard, and the few little ghouls were all beaten into mush, falling limply to the ground. The Holy Dragon City cultivators who were saved were shocked. When they turned around and saw the little ghouls on the ground, they immediately smiled gratefully at Tang Jin. Then, with a ferocious expression, they continued to chase after the little ghouls that were running around. Be careful of these little ghouls' sneak attacks from behind. It's best to form groups of 3 and stick close to each other back to back. After Tang Jin reminded him, he locked his gaze on a little zombie that he had nailed to the ground with his alloy sword and activated the monster detector. Undead Clan's Shadow Guard, Level 1 Monster. Immature form, a deformed monster that was born prematurely. Its strength is very low, but it is fast. Its teeth and claws have corrosive venom. Weakness: due to premature birth, its body is extremely fragile and will shatter with a single blow. Looking at the introduction of the monster detector, Tang Jin had a further understanding of the Undead Clan city. The current city of the Undead Clan had probably become a nest for hatching all kinds of undead monsters. With the existence of this nest, the spiritual Brain Corpse King could directly breed the Corpse Clan without having to waste effort to open the space channel. The cost of opening a space channel was too high, and this method was more cost-effective. The Spirit Brain Corpse King was indeed a wily old fox. After its torture, the corpse race had completely taken root in the Tower World. Even if the space channel couldn't be opened, it didn't have to worry about a lack of troops. The current Corpse Clan's Liu Qing was only at level 1, but it could already give birth to so many corpse monsters. If it advanced to a higher level, who knew how many corpse monsters it would give birth to at a time? However, this kind of reproduction method of the corpse race's Liu Qing made Tang Jin's heart tremble slightly. If he obtained the foundation of the Corpse Clan City Tower and rebuilt it, would he be able to master this kind of breeding method? Read latest chapters at n/velbi.co/m. At that time, could he also cultivate human bodies in large quantities and use them to host souls? The more Tang Jin thought about it, the more he felt that it was very feasible. He was also looking forward to the foundation stone of the corpse race's tower. The battle in the hall was still going on, and more little corpse ghosts were being produced in advance. The ground was filled with broken meatballs, and the little corpse ghosts were scurrying around. In fact, as long as they were careful, these little ghouls would not be able to cause any harm to cultivators. However, they were scurrying around and would climb onto him from time to time, making him extremely annoyed. Only Tang Jin knew that once these little corpse ghosts became mature, they would become terrifying Corpse Clan monsters. At that time, it would not be as simple as it was now to kill them. Now that they had attacked the Corpse Clan city, everyone had picked up a big bargain. However, when they were attacking the little ghouls, the cultivators subconsciously avoided the ogres that were jumping around on the ground, afraid that they would be hit by their clubs. These cultivators had personally witnessed the ogres' battle scene. Seeing the corpse race being smashed into meat paste by the ogres, no one would want to experience that feeling. Perhaps it was because the ogres were too big, but almost half of the little ghouls pounced on the ogres. They climbed up the ogres' bodies and tried to bite their flesh. However, these little ghouls didn't know that the ogres' greatest characteristic was that they weren't afraid of damage and poison. When the little ghouls bit the ogres, other than making the ogres feel an unbearable itch, they had no other effect. On the contrary, with a wave of the ogre's claws, countless little ghouls would be smashed into minced meat. Then, they would be stuffed into the ghouls' mouths and chewed. The fresh and tender little ghouls made the ogres eat with smiles on their faces. This bloody scene made everyone retch. De Xion, on the other hand, was watching with great interest. He even bent over and dug out a few brains from the remains of the little ghouls, stuffed them into his mouth, and swallowed them happily. Tang Jin had long known that Big Bear had such a habit. He did not make a fuss when he saw this. On the other hand, the city master of Centauria Valley took a few deep looks at the Big Bear, and a smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, as if she knew something. Tang Jin knew that this woman was quite knowledgeable and knew many things that Tang Jin did not know. Perhaps, De Xion's performance had caused her to recall something. That was why her gaze had stopped for such a long time. If there was a chance, he still had to consult her. This matter concerned his trusted aide, and Tang Jin did not dare to be the least bit careless. There were more and more remains of the little corpse ghosts on the ground, but there were fewer and fewer little corpse ghosts running around. The pressure on the cultivators was also reduced a little. Some of the cultivators who had been bitten by the little ghouls also retreated to the side under the urging of their companions and began to treat their wounds. The wounds caused by the little ghouls were very troublesome to deal with. Due to the poison in their mouths, black blood kept flowing out of the wounds, and the skin and flesh around the wounds also showed signs of rotting. Tang Jin was worried that this zombie poison would affect the body of cultivators. Just as he was about to take out the IV ointment and distribute it to his subordinates, he saw the 100 Flower Valley City Lord walk to the front of Big Bear. At the same time, he smiled at Big Bear and said, "Big guy, can you make your ogre spit?" De Xion's brows furrowed together. He didn't know if he should agree to the 100 Flower Valley City Lord's request. He looked at Tang Jin with a pleading gaze, and saw Tang Jin gently nod his head. With Tang Jin's permission, Big Bear grinned and pointed at the tallest ogre. "Fatty, you spit." The ogre that Big Bear called Big Fatty pouted and spat on the ground without hesitation. The smell of this ogre's saliva was extremely strong, but the Centauria Valley City Lord walked in front of the saliva without a change in expression. She used her battle sword to dip in some of it, then applied it to the cultivators who had been bitten by the little ghoul. Strangely enough, after the ogre's saliva was applied to the rotting wound, the black blood that was constantly flowing out slowly stopped bleeding. The rotten flesh also stopped worsening. After about half a minute, the 100 Flower Valley City Master used a dagger to cut off the rotten flesh from the wound. A trace of bright red blood flowed out, and the poison effect of the little corpse ghost's bite had been completely removed. Tang Jin clicked his tongue in wonder after seeing this. He didn't expect that the ogre's saliva would actually have such an effect. Without needing Tang Jin's instructions, Qianlong began to follow the steps and used the saliva of the ogres to treat the wounds of his subordinates. After the rotten flesh was removed, he applied an IV ointment and used a clean bandage to wrap the wounds. By the time all the wounded cultivators' wounds had been treated, the remaining little corpse ghosts had also been completely cleaned up. Right now, there were broken limbs and minced meat under everyone's feet. The sticky liquid almost covered the surface of their feet, and the air was filled with a foul smell. Tang Jin touched his nose and ordered the cultivators of the Holy Dragon City to bring along the underwater breathing insect. He was worried that there was poison in the air of the Corpse Clan's building, so it was better to bring it along just in case. Seeing the Holy Dragon City cultivators all open their backpacks and take out strange bugs from their water bottles to seal their mouths and noses, the 100 Flower Valley cultivators were all confused. Holy Dragon City Master is indeed powerful. Even the famous insect thief fell at your hands. This little sister is impressed. The city lord of Centauria Valley looked at the strange worm on the Holy Dragon City cultivator's mouth. At first, she furrowed her willowy brows in confusion, but then she came to a sudden realization and praised Tangjin. In this wilderness area, the reputation of the insect thieves was very big, the kind that was notorious. Although the insectoid thief rarely used the underwater breathing insect, the woman was very knowledgeable, so it was not surprising that she could recognize the underwater breathing monsters. It's just some ignorant thieves that were casually destroyed. However, these insects are very interesting. It's a waste of God's gifts in the hands of those thieves. Tangjin casually replied to the 100 Flower Valley city lord. Clearly, he did not take this matter to heart. After passing through the hall, they came to the passage to the second floor. The steps that were wrapped in fat and blood vessels formed a strange blood and flesh channel. If one wanted to go up, they had to go through this channel. Tangjin slightly frowned as he looked at the flesh tunnel. He took out a rifle and fired a round. He only stopped shooting after he shot until flesh and blood splattered. The flesh tunnel that was shot by Tangjin was currently wriggling. It was as though a huge worm was convulsing in pain. Everyone looked at the scene in front of them and frowned. They didn't know if they should continue to climb. After Tangjin activated the detection function and confirmed that there was no danger in the tunnel, he took the lead and walked up. Seeing this, the cultivators of the Holy Dragon City naturally followed closely behind. The cultivators of 100 Flower Valley looked at each other and turned to the city lord, asking, "City lord, I'm afraid it's very dangerous up there. Should we still follow?" "Of course we have to follow them. Otherwise, we'll be looked down upon by those guys from Holy Dragon City." The city master of 100 Flower Valley snorted and turned to look at her subordinates. "After we go up, everyone must be on high alert. This time, we're only assisting in clearing the Corpse Clan's buildings. We can't be too forceful." After the 100 Flower Valley city master finished speaking, she took the lead and stepped onto the greasy steps, quickly chasing after them. However, when the 100 Flower Valley city master stepped onto the second floor, she was immediately stunned by the scene in front of her, and her face was filled with astonishment. On the vast second floor, there were countless thick intestines twisted together. They were like slippery eels, constantly wriggling and twitching, looking extremely disgusting. Tangjin was standing in the middle of the second floor with an expressionless face. Not far from him was a huge translucent meatball. The meatball seemed to be filled with a sticky liquid and was trembling slightly. Through the faintly discernible flesh wall, one could see that there seemed to be many human bodies floating inside. There were men and women, and their expressions were peaceful. However, their eyes were tightly closed and their hands and feet would tremble slightly from time to time, like an unformed fetus. The bodies in the meatballs should be the residents of the tower that the Spirit Brain Zombie King had cultivated. After the transformation, they completely belong to this world and have become the indigenous people of this world. After they were born, they could upgrade their buildings normally, allowing the Corpse Clan's buildings to completely integrate into this world and not be suppressed by any rules. The Spiritual Brain Corpse King took great pains. It was indeed a good plan, but what a pity! After Tangjin said this, he turned to look at the 100 Flower Valley city lord and chuckled. That Spirit Brain Corpse King probably never thought that someone would rush into the city of the Corpse Clan at this moment and turn its lair upside down. "Destroy it!" Tangjin ordered everyone to retreat far away. He then waved his hand at the Holy Dragon City's cultivators. Immediately, 2 cultivators with rifles in their hands began to shoot at the translucent meatball. Bang bang bang! And NBSP, as the bullets continued to fire, the translucent meat wall was filled with holes. Sticky liquid shot out from the holes, mixed with blood. The bodies that had been floating in the meatball were now riddled with bullet holes and convulsing in pain. It seemed that the liquid had a magical healing effect. It was constantly repairing the wounds caused by the bullets, but before the old wounds were completely repaired, new bullet holes appeared. The shooting continued for a full minute before the translucent meatball could no longer withstand the impact of the bullets and suddenly exploded. Sticky fluid and broken bodies were scattered all over the ground, covering the second floor, forcing everyone to hide. Looking at the bodies that were struggling like thirsty fish after being separated from the mucus, the cultivators all stepped forward and killed them all. Tang Jin ignored the wailing of those bodies. He sized up his surroundings in an attempt to find the entrance to the top floor. The entrance must be there, but it was blocked by those huge intestines and couldn't be seen for the time being. Tang Jin waved his hand and called Big Bear over. After Tang Jin whispered a few words to him, Big Bear excitedly called out to the ogres under him and pounced towards the large intestines with an excited expression. In fact, the ogres were attracted by the large intestines the moment they entered the second floor. They only felt that they were extremely delicious. If it was before being domesticated, the ogres would have rushed up impatiently and had a good meal. But ever since they were domesticated, the ogres were used to obeying orders, so they could only look at the delicious giant intestines, not daring to eat them. Having good things but not being able to eat them was a huge torture for the ogres. No wonder the ogres had been restless ever since they came up to the second floor. They couldn't eat the delicious food in front of them. Now that they had received the order to devour these large intestines without restraint, the ogres were naturally excited. Then, the ogres rushed to the front of the giant intestine and swung their clubs down. The huge intestine was torn apart by the wolf-tooth club, and the fat splashed everywhere. The ogre grabbed the still wriggling large intestine and stuffed it into his mouth, his face filled with enjoyment. After confirming that the large intestines were as delicious as they had imagined, the ogres began to gobble them up, smashing the large intestines into pieces. The ground was covered in disgusting grease and broken intestines. At the same time, an extremely disgusting smell spread out, making people want to vomit. In an instant, it had filled the entire second floor. The cultivators of the Holy Dragon City had filtered out the disgusting smell because they had the underwater breathing insect with them. However, the cultivators of the 100-Flower Valley were in a worse state. They were not prepared at all and could only cover their noses. The ogres ate in high spirits, but the onlookers were disgusted. Tang Jin frowned as he looked at the 100-Flower Valley's city lord with a smile that was not a smile. The other party glared at him fiercely before covering his mouth and nose with a pale face. He snorted softly. "Did you already know about the situation here? Otherwise, why would you think of wearing those bugs?" Tang Jin shook his head as his voice came out from behind the body of the underwater breathing monster. "What kind of good taste do you think a monster's stomach will have? The facts have proven that I was right." Tang Jin shrugged his shoulders and looked at the two puking 100-Flower Valley female cultivators, revealing an expression of wanting to help but unable to. The Holy Dragon City cultivators with the underwater monsters talked and laughed without restraint, while the 100-Flower Valley cultivators could only cover their mouths and noses tightly, afraid of smelling that disgusting smell. What he had to do now was to watch the ogres destroy the place until the passage to the top floor appeared. In terms of destructive power alone, no one could be compared to the ogres except for Tang Jin. The ogres that used maces were simply a disaster when they started running, and the places they passed by were too horrible to look at. Fortunately, they were now under the control of the Holy Dragon City. They would only play around in the giant intestines, tearing them into pieces, but would not hurt the cultivators of the two cities. The ogres became more and more excited, like mice that had fallen into a rice jar, and they danced happily. The feeling of being surrounded by delicious food made the ogres extremely happy. They even started rolling around in the huge intestines on the ground. The corner of Tang Jin's mouth twitched as he watched. He let the big bear give the order and urged the ogres to hurry up and work. The big bear rushed in front of the ogre and roared a few times. The ogre unwillingly stood up and continued to tear the remaining large intestines. An ogre swung his mace and broke a large, fat intestine. The mace hit the steps behind him and made a loud bang. Tangjin's face was filled with joy as he ordered the ogres to clear the area, quickly revealing the huge steps behind. After the ogres cleared the flesh tunnel, Tangjin used the digitized all-round combat interface to scan it. After confirming that there was no danger, he slowly walked up the stairs to the top floor. Similar to the second floor, the walls and ceiling of the third floor were also covered with fat meat with dense blood vessels, but without the disgusting giant intestines. There was a pool of blood in the center of the third floor. A super brain the size of a car was placed in it. It was covered in purple-red blood vessels that were constantly fluctuating. At the bottom of this brain, there was a distorted human face that was fiercely glaring at Tangjin. This face was very familiar to Tangjin. It was the Corpse King's clone that he had seen before. However, it was unrecognizable now. Its brain was infinitely enlarged, and the body below the neck was connected to the fat on the ground. At this moment, it was constantly twitching. After seeing this scene, Tangjin suddenly realized that the Spirit Brain Corpse King had transformed its clone into a huge deformed monster. The huge intestines downstairs were probably the internal organs of the Spirit Brain Zombie King, and the little ghouls on the first floor were the combat troops it had bred. The super brain in front of him should be the head region of the Spirit Brain Corpse King. A faint smile appeared on the corner of Tangjin's mouth as he carefully sized up the giant brain in front of him. Finally, he looked at that ferocious face. Spirit Brain Corpse King, how have you been? Tangjin looked at the Spiritual Brain Corpse King and said softly. At the same time, he made a hand gesture to Tai Seng and the others. After Tai Seng and the others received the signal, they immediately went into a state of alert. As long as Tangjin gave the order to attack, the weapons in their hands would open fire at any time. Seeing that the Spirit Brain Corpse King didn't reply, Tangjin took another step forward and coldly said, "You must be very weak right now. You didn't expect me to appear at this time, did you?" The Spirit Brain Corpse King still didn't respond. Tangjin was overjoyed and was about to attack, but the Spirit Brain Corpse King smiled maliciously. "Damned insect, you've truly exceeded my expectations. I didn't think that in such a short time you'd already possess the cultivation of rank 5. You've even destroyed my hard work once again." The Spirit Brain Corpse King glared at Tangjin, its eyes full of anger. It wanted to eat this guy who had caused it to suffer losses time and time again. Tangjin was right. At this time, the Spirit Brain Corpse King was in an extremely fragile state. It had used a secret technique to transform its clone, making it merge with the tower. Once it was successful, the Spirit Brain Corpse King would gain huge benefits. However, there was a drawback to this transformation. The Spirit Brain Corpse King, which originally had the strength of a Lord tier, now had less than 1/10 of its previous combat power. It was for this reason that the Spirit Brain Zombie King would only carry out the transformation of its body after taking control of the surrounding area. Black Rock City was besieged by countless corpse monsters, the city of the Corpse Clan was heavily guarded, and the newly built Holy Dragon City was also besieged by its troops in case of any unexpected situations. Now, the wanderers and monsters wandering in this wilderness had all become part of the corpse monsters. In this situation where the enemy was pinned down and besieged, the Spiritual Brain Corpse King felt that its safety was enough to carry out the physical transformation. However, it had never dreamed that a person like Tangjin would exist in this world. Not only did he annihilate the undead army surrounding the Holy Dragon City, but he had also destroyed his own lair and killed all the undead guarding the city. A strong sense of crisis struck, making the Spirit Brain Corpse King furious, but there was nothing it could do. In order to drive out Tangjin and the others who had entered the city, the Spirit Brain Corpse King had no choice but to release the little corpse ghosts that it had just cultivated. Unfortunately, the combat power of these unmatured ones was limited and they couldn't stop Tangjin at all. Next, Tangjin destroyed the residents of the building it was cultivating and crushed all its internal organs. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. The Spiritual Brain Corpse King was in excruciating pain, but there was nothing it could do. At this moment, it could only summon the undead that were besieging Black Rock City to come back and help. However, water from afar could not put out a fire nearby, so the Spirit Brain Corpse King could only try to delay the time. He hoped that the reptile in front of him did not see through his plan. Thinking up to this point, the Spirit Brain Corpse King immediately revealed the huge tentacles hidden in the blood pool and constantly waved them, trying to make Tangjin feel fear and not dare to attack easily. Tangjin looked at the enormous tentacle that had suddenly appeared. His heart was also slightly startled as he involuntarily took 2 steps back. The Spiritual Brain Corpse King was a genuine Lord-tier monster, one of the 8 great corpse kings of the Corpse Clan dimension. If Tangjin said that he wasn't afraid of it, it would be a lie to himself. Although the Spirit Brain Corpse King looked very weak at this time, and Tangjin had also confirmed this through many performances, he still didn't dare to act rashly. This wasn't because Tangjin was timid. Rather, it was because he was playing the role of a venomous snake that was hunting. He was quietly waiting for the enemy to reveal his vital parts before giving a fatal blow. The more violent the Spirit Brain Corpse King was, the more weaknesses it would expose. When it tried to intimidate Tangjin, it revealed its tentacles. This allowed Tangjin to discover a hidden attack in advance. This could have been used as a trump card for a surprise attack, but it was exposed by the Spirit Brain Corpse King in advance, so everyone was prepared. In Tangjin's impression, the Spirit Brain Corpse King was not a simple enemy. However, its current performance showed that it had a guilty conscience. Since that was the case, what else did he have to hesitate about? Tangjin's eyes flashed with killing intent as he suddenly swung his arm, and the alloy sword in his hand ruthlessly pierced into the brain of the Spirit Brain Corpse King. Ayo! The Spirit Brain Corpse King screamed as the tentacles in the blood pool pounced towards Tangjin. However, they were stopped in midair by the bullets fired by the Holy Dragon City cultivators. Another group of Holy Dragon City cultivators aimed at the Spirit Brain Zombie King's giant brain and continued to rain bullets. The cultivators of Blossom Valley stood at the back, using their bows and spears to attack the brain of the Spirit Brain Corpse King. At the moment of being attacked, a layer of light shield appeared outside the giant brain of the Spiritual Brain Corpse King, blocking the whistling bullets, and the ripples kept on surging. Tangjin loudly roared and activated the miniature death light weapon. A dazzling light beam shot out and instantly burned a large hole in the protective barrier. The beam of light did not stop and burned a big black hole in the super giant brain of the Spiritual Brain Corpse King, causing it to scream in pain. As Tangjin's attack landed, the Spirit Brain Corpse King's protective barrier was completely shattered. Countless bullets and arrows landed on it, causing one of the giant brains to fall into pieces. The Spirit Brain Corpse King let out a miserable cry, its broken tentacle waved twice, and then it completely stopped moving. Well, that's all for this part, truckers. See you all in the next video.